Lin and stood at the door of the research room. Seeing that the talents dispatched from the Qianlong Research Institute are busy in it like an ant colony, I thought to myself. Right now, the fortified agent has been officially put into production. Just wait until people are fully familiar with the existing environment. You can strengthen these equipment yourself, so as to improve the efficacy and production of medicines, to prepare for the subsequent vaccination of the whole people. By that time, the survivability of the people in the shelter will become stronger. At the same time, the survivability and mobility of the entire shelter will also be improved. This is a real qualitative change. Just thinking about it, Lin and suddenly saw a young man in a white coat approaching. Lin and knew that this person's name was Zhou Zhu, and he was the current interim director of the pharmaceutical experiment room. Retracted his thoughts, and Lin and asked, "What's wrong?" A look of embarrassment appeared on Zhou Zhu's face. "Mr. Lin, something went wrong. This may need to be dealt with by you. Go and have a look." Lin and said aloud. "Follow Zhou Zhu across the aisle." Lin and walked into a makeshift conference room. Before entering the door, the voice of the conference room came out. "It's really not good. Although the equipment has a basic framework, it is still not complete. Yes, not only that, but due to the environmental impact, we have no way to make the environment in the room meet the standard of a sterile room. Hey, a lot of samples are contaminated. More than that, our measuring cups and microscope lenses are not up to standard. Even if you want to manually polish this kind of thing, how can it be good?" Everyone said. Zhou Zhu pushed open the door. Hearing the sound, everyone stopped talking. Turning around, seeing Lin and a group of people subconsciously stood up and greeted him. "Hello, Mr. Lin. Mr. Lin, you are finally here. We have a lot of questions." "I already know about the situation." Lin nodded and said, "Is it mainly a problem with the equipment?" Everyone looked at each other and nodded silently. Soon, someone frowned and said aloud, "Mr. Lin, when I was at the Qianlong Research Institute, because the predecessor of the Qianlong Research Institute was the Research Institute, the sterile environment there has been preserved from before the end of the world to the present. But the environment here in the Dawning Refuge is better than the Qianlong Research Institute. However, it still falls short of the standard of a sterile room." "That's right." Someone next to him nodded. "It's not difficult if you want to create a sterile room. However, because of the airtightness of the rooms here, it is difficult for us to maintain a sterile environment for long periods of time. Even if we create a sterile room by various means, as long as it takes more than a few minutes, the unclosed gap will allow air to flow in. At that time, the whole room will become the same as before." Listening to the researcher on the side talking, Zhou Zhu rubbed his head in pain. "We've thought of many ways, but none of them can completely eradicate these problems. So I wanted to ask you if we're going to give up some capacity and make it in a workshop mode, if we can. In this case, although the output will drop a little, it can ensure the quality of the medicines and prevent the medicines from being contaminated." From the previous remarks of these people and the expressions on their faces at this time, it is not difficult for Lin to see that these people are seriously considering the Dawning Refuge. However, these people still haven't gotten out of their pre-apocalyptic thinking circuits. Looking around at the people in front of him, Lin said aloud, "No need, go and call Xiao Xiao over." Hearing Lin An's words, Zhou Zhu felt a little strange, but he did as he was told. After a while, Zhou Zhu walked in. Yin Xiaoxiao followed behind. It seems that he is not used to people watching. Some timidly glanced at everyone in the room. Yin Xiaoxiao approached Lin and asked aloud, "Lin, what happened? Why did you suddenly call me over?" "Now the research room lacks some equipment, you can help them deal with it," Lin said. It turned out to be for this matter. Yin Xiaoxiao relaxed with a slight smile on her face. "What equipment are you missing now? Make a list for me." A group of researchers meet face to face. After a moment of hesitation, one person said carefully, "This girl, it's not that we don't believe you, it's just that you don't look like you were born in scientific research. You don't know how demanding the parts of the equipment we need are, it's not something that can be done by hand." "That's right." The other person next to him nodded. "And not only these experimental equipment, we also need to level the room. Also, plan the layout of the instruments. These things require extremely fine-tuned discretionary tools. With the current human environment, we simply have no way of making something with such high precision." Before the group of people finished speaking, Yin Xiaoxiao looked up firmly when they saw it. "Give me a photo and a description, just leave the rest to me." The researchers looked at each other, but in the end, one person picked up the tablet that he brought with him to store the data, found out the shape and data of the device, and handed it over to Duan Xiaoxiao. After just 1 minute, Yin Xiaoxiao, who had read it several times, raised her head and said seriously, "I should be able to figure it out, please wait a moment." In a group of eyes that were hesitant to speak, she lowered her head intently, her hands emitting white light. A few minutes later, a precise instrument appeared in his hand. Seeing the things in Yin Xiaoxiao's hands, a group of people widened their eyes. "What? It's actually made. This thing, if we have this thing, we can skip a lot of complicated steps." A group of people spoke, and their eyes frantically gathered around. Yin Xiaoxiao was a little nervous, and shoved the instrument in her hand to the nearest researcher. The staff member took the instrument and found it a treasure. Under the envious gaze of his peers, he first played with the instrument for a while, and then he held the instrument and gestured in the house. After a while, the man put away the instrument in his hand, and the expression on his face was serious and solemn. "This thing can be used." As soon as the voice fell, everyone was in an uproar again. Since the end of the world, the production activities and production capacity of the entire human being can be said to be less than 1/10,000th of what it was before the end of the world. In this case, some things that are readily available on weekdays are so difficult to obtain at this time. Before everyone could sigh with emotion, Yin Xiaoxiao pulled Zhou's assistant to ask a few more questions, and then took out the various tools that everyone lacked before. With Yin's small movements, everyone's eyes became bigger and bigger. At this time, Yin Xiaoxiao looked like a treasure bag that could take out anything. When she took out the last utensil and put it on the table, Yin Xiaoxiao wiped the sweat from her forehead and looked a little tired. After glancing at the crowd in front of him, Duan Xiaoxiao asked aloud, "Apart from these, do you need anything else?" Zhou Ju's expression was as if he was sleepwalking and said, "How on earth did you get these things?" With that said, Zhou Zhu shuddered and regained his senses. With a smile on his face, Zhou Zhu excitedly said, "These things are enough. No, it can even be said that it has exceeded our requirements." Yin Xiaoxiao breathed a sigh of relief, her legs softened. Lin An's eyes were quick and his hands were quick, and he calmly supported Yin Xiaoxiao. "Thank you," Yin Xiao said in a low voice. Lin An nodded. Although Yin Xiaoxiao can make all kinds of utensils through her own abilities. However, due to the influence of mental power, being able to take out so many pieces can be regarded as using the strength of feeding. Seeing that Yin Xiaoxiao seemed a little dizzy again, Lin An turned his eyes on everyone. "With these things, you should be able to complete the most basic requirements." Hearing Lin An's words, everyone's face showed joy. A group of people nodded fiercely. "Mr. Lin, don't worry, with these basic equipment, we can make anything." "That's right, don't underestimate us. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that what I thought about for so long at the Qianlong Research Institute would actually be obtained in the Dawning Refuge. Looks like I really did it right this time. I just don't know if the guys at the Qianlong Research Institute who continue to stay there, knowing that we have these artifacts, will they record that their eyes are red?" Everyone said that they were about to leave. Lin An said suddenly. "You wait a moment." Hearing Lin An's words, everyone stopped and looked at Lin An with some doubts. Under everyone's attention, Lin An walked out of the conference room and approached the ion distiller moved from Qianlong Research Institute. Pressing his hand on the oval outer wall of the ion distiller, Lin An gently closed his eyes while thinking about it. The invisible force penetrated into the ion still again. After a while, under everyone's attention, there was a screeching sound inside the ion distiller. Hearing the abnormal sound coming from the machine, everyone was shocked. However, before he could speak, the instrument suddenly moved. I saw that the conveyor belt of the ion distiller suddenly disassembled by itself, and then reassembled again. It's just that, unlike before, there were originally only one production line's crawler, but now it has become two. Although a considerable reduction in thickness, the newly formed conveyor belt appears to be straighter. At the same time, the shape is more refined. Not only that, the fractionator and centrifuge in the main part of the ion distiller are no longer in a semi-open state as before, but in a completely closed state. The sudden change shocked everyone. Staring straight at the completion of the change in the ion distiller, Zhou Zhu said in disbelief. "What happened? Mr. Lin, what exactly did you do to the ion still?" Lin An retracted his palm and looked at the sluggish crowd. "I've beefed up this device. Ion stills now have about 4 times the performance they had before. When you are using it later, if there is any problem such as wear and tear of parts, you can ask Yin Xiaoxiao by my side for replacement parts. I just made a simple optimization of the internal structure of the ion distiller. It should not be difficult to repair. I believe that you can solve it by doing your own research. The voice fell, and everyone suddenly returned to their senses. The expressions on their faces became a little suspicious, but soon, these people showed excitement again. If those words just came from the mouth of an ordinary person, these researchers present would definitely not believe a word. However, these words came out of Lin An's mouth with an unusual meaning. All kinds of magical performances in Qianlong Research Institute before. Coupled with the abnormal vertical takeoff and landing function of the transport plane, everyone has clearly realized it. The Lin An in front of him is not the kind of person who can only talk big. Instead, he is a terrifying being who has mastered unknown black technology. After a brief silence, one of the researchers suddenly took a breath and muttered to himself. If according to Mr. Lin's statement, wouldn't our daily output of medicines reach more than 10,000? As soon as these words came out, everyone's eyes burst open. In the audience, the sound of sucking cold air continued. The ion distiller placed in the Qianlong Research Institute is extremely valuable. It can be said that it is the crystallization of the wisdom of all mankind before the end of the world. This kind of thing, even in peaceful times, is a good thing that can make big countries jealous. If you want to improve its performance, even if it is only 10% more efficient, it will be tsunami-level news in the scientific community. However, Lin An lacks parts and corresponding materials. The performance of the instrument was greatly enhanced by simply pressing the hand on the instrument. This made everyone feel more or less like they were dreaming. On the other hand, Zhou Zhu's expression was a little apprehensive. Approaching Lin An, Zhou Zhu whispered, "Mr. Lin, I don't mean to disbelieve you, but can I test this instrument first?" "Yes," Lin An said. With Lin An's permission, Zhou Zhu took a deep breath and walked to the instrument. After turning on the electronic screen and operating it for a moment, Zhou Zhu turned around and nodded to everyone. "Everyone, the instrument has been tested. Mr. Lin is a little too conservative. If this machine works at full capacity, our daily production will be at least 12,000 square meters a day." "What?" The crowd was in an uproar and immediately became excited. A group of people ignored Lin An and gathered around the ion distiller, looking at the various data on the electronic screen while making bursts of breathless sounds. Seeing these people's frenzied expressions and completely focusing on the instrument, Lin An didn't say much. After saying hello to Yin Xiaoxiao, he took Yin Xiaoxiao out of the laboratory. After leaving the room, Yin Xiaoxiao looked at the frenetic atmosphere in the research room, with a smile on her face. These people are really focused. Lin An turned his head and glanced at the instrument again, without saying much. There were no major changes when Lin An enhanced the ion still. No other functions have been added. Just optimized the internal structure and operating efficiency of the ion distiller. After optimization, while the efficiency of the ion distiller is improved, its own purification effect will be far superior to the previous one. Correspondingly, the medicine produced is more stable and the effect is better. However, the medicine itself will not have too exaggerated qualitative changes. After all, the Dawning Refuge can only be regarded as a temporary base strictly speaking. Before long, Lin An will move all the research equipment and supplies to Ark Island. It is impossible to handle the process yourself. Therefore, it is very likely that the precision of the instrument will be reduced due to improper transportation during the transportation of this kind of instrument that is too fine. At that time, the instrument will need to be readjusted after reinstalling the instrument on Ark Island. If the ion distiller is intensified too far at this time, then its precision will also increase. At that time, the maintenance difficulty brought about by the improvement of precision will also increase by a geometric index. Lin An knew that after arriving at Ark Island, he had a lot of things to do, so he definitely didn't have time to be a repairman. So I just adjusted the ion distiller to optimize it as much as possible on the premise that these researchers can maintain it by themselves. The issue of pharmaceutical production has been resolved. Next, just wait patiently for the medicine to be enough, and then prepare for the next step. But before that, I still need to make a round trip to Qianlong Research Institute to transport all the remaining instruments. Thinking of this, Lin An turned and left with Yin Xiaoxiao. The next day, the transport plane landed slowly, and when the hatch opened, Lin An walked down. Instructing the members of the Dawning Refuge who were waiting nearby to disassemble and transport the large instrument, Lin An lifted his foot and walked towards the pharmaceutical production room. After passing through the passage, Lin An saw at the door a group of researchers including Zhou Zhu methodically operating various instruments to produce enhanced medicines. At this time, Bottles of medicine are transported from the production line like flowing water on the entire production line. Seeing this scene, Lin made some estimates in his mind and walked into the room with his feet up. At this time, Zhou Zhu is immersed in the assembly line production. He didn't react until Lin patted it. Stopping the movement, Zhou Zhu turned his head to look, and immediately became respectful. "Mr. Lin, you are back." Lin nodded, glanced at the assembly line through the translucent glass, and said suddenly, "The material should be running out." Before, during the process of transport by the transport plane, Lin had been clear through the researchers of Qianlong Research Institute. In order to obtain the potion, blood must be drawn from a living body. Moreover, the difference in the physical strength of the blood provider will also affect the production of the medicine itself. Before coming, the Qianlong Research Institute also carried some materials for the production of medicines. However, after Lin strengthened the ion still, the output was greatly improved at this time. The materials that were brought before seemed a bit stretched. Sure enough, when Lin's voice fell, Zhou Zhu's expression became a little embarrassed. Nodding lightly, Zhou Zhu said aloud, "Mr. Lin, I'm going to tell you about this. At the current production rate of the ion still, I'm afraid there will be a shortage of raw materials by tomorrow afternoon." Speaking of which, Zhou's assistant glanced at the crowd who were carrying various parts and components and shook his head. "I'm afraid the second ion still will be out of use. Unless we can find a lot of blood in a short period of time." Lin's expression didn't change. "You bring some people with me to get blood." "What?" Zhou Zhu was slightly taken aback and frowned. Purifying blood and making evolution potions by adding catalysts is an extremely tedious process in itself. Hearing Lin's words, Zhou Zhu instinctively thought that Lin intended to let the members in the shelter donate blood to provide raw materials. After hesitating for a while, Zhou Zhu still gritted his teeth and said, "Mr. Lin, if human blood is to be used for purification, the purification process will become extremely cumbersome because there is no biological barrier. I don't recommend using human blood to make evolutionary potions. This can have unforeseen effects and may even turn into an accident." Lin glanced at Zhou Zhu without explaining, just waved his hand and asked Zhou Zhu to lead someone to follow. Seeing Lin insisting on doing it, Zhou Zhu felt a little helpless. He could only sigh in his heart, and greeted some people to bring collection equipment and follow behind Lin. After leaving the Dawning Refuge, standing beside the transport plane, the researchers who followed Zhou Zhulai were a little puzzled. One person came close to Zhou Zhu and said in a low voice, "What are we doing here? Isn't it about taking blood?" At this time, Zhou Zhu was also a little puzzled. However, before he could ask, Lin whistled. Hearing this voice, Zhou Zhu's expression changed, and then he reacted. When he came to the Dawning Refuge before, Zhou Zhu learned from the driver in the cockpit that the transport plane was attacked by mutant birds during its approach. Then, it was resolved by the falcon who came with Lin. At that time, Zhou Zhu was just listening to a story when he was idle and bored, and he didn't take it to heart. Seeing Lin's actions at this time, Zhou Zhu's heart flashed. Yes, Mr. Lin has the ability to control mutant animals. The blood of mutant beasts, which is difficult for us to obtain, is very easy for Mr. Lin. Thinking of this, Zhou Zhu frowned again. It's just that there shouldn't be much blood in the bird's body. If you want to extract enough raw materials, I am afraid that you have to rely on the method of gathering sand into a tower. Looks like it's going to be hard work. Before the thoughts in his heart dissipated, Zhou Zhu suddenly felt a little dizzy. When he came back to his senses, Zhou Zhu glanced at the slightly beating stone under his feet and became nervous. "Everyone, be careful, there's an earthquake." The voice fell, and a researcher pointed not far ahead with a startled expression. "Look at it." Hearing the voice, Zhou Zhu subconsciously looked up. "I saw smoke and dust in the distance, and a large number of black shadows were coming straight towards him and others. The distance between the two sides is not very far." Zhou Zhu focused on checking. Cat, dog, lion, jackal. All kinds of animals, regardless of whether they eat meat or vegetarian food, are rushing towards him and others in groups at this time. The invisible pressure brought by the scene of the galloping beasts was like a boulder pressing on Zhou Zhu's heart. Out of biological instinct, Zhou Zhu subconsciously stepped back and shouted, "Everyone, be careful, it's a beast tide." With that said, Zhou Zhu turned around to run. Just before taking 2 steps, Zhou Zhu suddenly found that the other people around him were just staring straight ahead, and no one was running away. "What are you still doing?" Zhou Zhu was a little anxious. If you don't run for a while now, it will be too late. No, look quickly. One person pointed to the front with an expression in disbelief. Zhou Zhu turned back subconsciously. When he saw the scene in front of him, his eyes widened. I saw that the mutant beast that ran over first stopped at a place more than 10 meters away from Lin and before it could get close. Not only that, a group of animals pressed their forelimbs to the ground and buckled their heads on the ground. Animals coming behind do the same after slowing down. In less than 5 minutes, Lin was crowded with all kinds of animals. At the same time, the tremors of the earth also stopped. This group. Zhou Zhu stared blankly at the scene in front of him and muttered to himself. Am I dreaming? Are these mutant beasts all summoned by Mr. Lin alone? With that said, Zhou assistant looked at Lin with a little more confusion and complexity. Surviving in the end times is difficult. Both men, women and children are looking for ways to improve their strength. After all, the higher the strength, the greater the possibility of survival. The original intention of the Qianlong Research Institute to develop this evolutionary medicine is also for this reason. But who would have thought? Just when everyone is still struggling to improve their personal strength. The young man in front of him had already trained the mutant beasts. Moreover, it is not difficult to guess the appearance of these beasts' surrender. I am afraid that these mutant beasts still have quite high IQ. How on earth did he do it? Is this too perverted? Zhou Zhu was a little absent-minded and muttered to himself. Just as he was talking, Zhou Zhu saw Lin and set his eyes on him. Draw blood. Lin said. Only then did Zhou Zhu return to his senses. Nodding his head, Zhou assistant greeted the others around him who were as sluggish as he was to prepare to draw blood. Taking out the needle, Zhou Zhu lifted his foot and walked to the face of a jackal. Before watching the jackal bury his head in the ground, without looking at himself, Zhou Zhu was still a little nervous. Taking a deep breath, Zhou Zhu barely calmed the emotions in his heart. Zhou Zhu carefully held the needle and stuck it on the jackal's forearm. Seeing that the jackal didn't respond, Zhou Zhu was relieved and started to move. Even getting blood from a few mutant beasts, Zhou Zhu saw that these mutant beasts really wouldn't resist, and their movements became much more agile. At this time, the conversation of several researchers around him attracted Zhou Zhu's attention. These mutant beasts are all controlled by Mr. Lin, right? It seems that this should be the case, otherwise these bloodthirsty mutant beasts would not be so obedient. This is too exaggerated. How did Mr. Lin do it? I don't know either, to be honest. This is the first time I've seen someone who can control so many mutant beasts. Yeah, if it were placed in the former Qianlong Research Institute, it would be amazing if an evolutionary person could control a mutant beast. Speaking of which, this scene is really spectacular. Everyone said and watched, and looked at Lin with a little more awe. The morning time flies by. The collection process went very smoothly. After filling all the existing containers, Zhou Zhu quickly found Lin. Seeing Zhou Zhu coming, Lin asked aloud, "Have you collected enough?" "Yes, Mr. Lin." Zhou Zhu nodded with a smile on his face. "Currently, the blood collected has enough for us to produce 100,000 evolutionary potions. We can now go full production." Lin nodded, glanced at everyone bringing the glass container into the experimental room, and thought for a while. At present, the raw materials for the evolution potion have been collected. After the first batch of medicine is produced, he can also start preparing to inject everyone in the shelter. However, this evolutionary medicine has no precedent for mass injection. Before the efficacy of the drug is determined to be stable enough, it is still necessary to stay by the side to prevent mutation or other unexpected situations. After thinking about it, Lin said, "I'll go with you." After a while, the first batch of 2,000 evolutionary medicines were neatly packed in a dedicated biochemical isolation box. In the research room, everyone was excited. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect our progress to be so fast. This is thanks to Mr. Lin's blessing. That's right, if it wasn't for Mr. Lin's transformation, this machine would never be as efficient as it is now. A group of people said and looked at Lin with admiration. "Mr. Lin, do you need to put the manufactured medicine in the warehouse first?" "No," Lin said aloud. "You guys bring the medicine with me." Saying that, Lin's eyes turned and fell on Yin Xiaoxiao, who was on the side. "You inform the others and prepare to come over to inoculate the evolution potion." Yin Xiaoxiao nodded and left quickly. 15 minutes later. In the huge assembly hall, people's heads moved. Li Wen stood in the crowd with a puzzled expression on his face. It took a long time to come to the Dawning Research Institute. These days, Li Wen has been conscientiously doing what he is doing, and he doesn't know what's going on in the outside world. Standing in the hall with two friends at this time, Li Wen looked at the expressions on the faces of the others around him and asked in confusion. "What's the matter with Mr. Lin calling us together this time?" "I don't know," someone next to him said, and the expression on his face suddenly became tense. Could it be that something major happened in the shelter? Otherwise, we would all be gathered together for no reason. "I don't think so." The other person looked at the expressions on his left and right faces thoughtfully. "Have you found out that none of the people who came here this time seem to be evolutionaries?" Hearing the reminder, Li Wen looked at it intently. After a while, Li Wen nodded and said aloud, "It seems to be the case. I looked at it, and none of those people in the Ministry of Defense seem to have one." As he spoke, Li Wen's expression changed. Could it be that the Dawning Research Institute is going to be expanded? Although I don't know much about the outside world. However, there have been many new faces in the Dawning Research Institute in the past 2 days. The originally booked accommodation also became a bit crowded. Therefore, Zhou Zhu guessed that Lin intends to expand the Dawning Research Institute to cope with the increase in the number of people. Just thinking about it, the rioting crowd quieted down. Aware of the abnormality, Li Wen turned to look. I saw Lin and lifted his feet and stepped onto the high platform. Glancing at the people below, Lin said aloud, "Everyone is now looking for the nearest staff member to register. We're starting to inoculate the evolution potion soon." The voice fell, and the surrounding doors opened. The staff of the research room each pushed a small trolley and walked in. Seeing the scene in front of them, the expressions of everyone in the gathering place were different. And Li Wen became a little nervous. Inoculated with evolution potion? Hearing the name of the evolution potion, Li Wen just had a thought in his mind to understand what Lin wanted to do. Li Wen instinctively resisted. The evolution potion, as the name suggests, is a tool used to strengthen the people in the shelter. If nothing else, this medicine should be able to activate a certain potential in the human body, and even make people become evolutionary. However, compared to the temptation to gain power, Li Wen is more worried about the safety of evolutionary medicine. Hesitating slightly in his heart, Li Wen raised his hand and said aloud, "Mr. Lin, I have something to ask." Lin nodded. "You said. Is this potion made from the blood of zombies?" Li Wen asked nervously. "No," Lin said aloud. Li Wengong breathed a sigh of relief, but listened to Lin and continued. "This is made from the blood of mutant beasts." "What? Mutant beast?" The crowd burst into an uproar. Li Wen immediately became vigilant, although he has full trust in Lin and Li Wen. However, after hearing how the evolution potion was made, Li Wen reacted. This evolutionary agent is likely to be similar to the pre-apocalyptic inactivated vaccine. The so-called inactivated vaccine actually reduces the activity of a product such as a diseased cell with strong virulence through some means. Or it is a means of blocking its proliferative ability to allow the body to achieve the purpose of adaptation. Before the end of the world, this kind of thing can indeed make its own cells generate memory without too much risk. But now it is a doomsday wasteland where a mutant beast can destroy reinforced concrete with only the flesh, and the evolutionary can use all kinds of magical means. In the absence of sufficient experimental data to control, no one can guarantee that this drug can be safely absorbed by the human body even with weakened virulence. If you don't get it right, you may even turn into zombies directly in situ. Undoubtedly, Li Wen raised his hand again and asked aloud, "Mr. Lin, do you have enough experimental samples for this evolutionary potion? Will he have major side effects?" Hearing Li Wen's question, everyone in the field who was still excited also became a little hesitant. Everyone looked at Lin and started talking. "Yes, Mr. Lin, what is the effect of this evolution potion? Is his fatality rate high? What will be the effect of inoculation with this evolutionary medicine?" Hearing the people asking, Lin set his eyes on Zhou Zhu. Aware of Lin's gaze, Zhou Zhu smiled and turned to look at everyone. "Everyone, don't worry. I will explain to you in detail the efficacy of this evolution potion." With that said, Zhou Zhu took out a potion from the biochemical isolation box. Under the light, the potion shone with a blue light like the ocean. The eyes of the crowd were attracted. "Everyone, this evolution potion is purified from the blood of mutant beasts. As long as you are inoculated with this medicine and absorbed by your body, there is a certain possibility that you will become an evolutionary person and awaken your unique abilities. Even if you can't successfully evolve, your physique will be greatly enhanced. Speaking of this, Zhou Zhu thought for a while and added another sentence. How much your physique increases depends on your potential. But one thing I can assure you, you will at least be more powerful than the special forces before the end of the world. Hearing Zhou assistant's words, some people took a deep breath. Li Wen questioned again. Can this kind of agent, which sounds like an inactivated vaccine, really be absorbed by ordinary people? Now is the end of the world. All kinds of powerful monsters are rampant, and our body's immune system can hardly bear this kind of thing. You don't have to worry about this. Zhou Zhu's smile remained unchanged. Everyone, I am an expert from the Qianlong Research Institute. In the Qianlong Research Institute, I was also responsible for inoculating other people in the Research Institute. Everyone can fully believe that the fatality rate of this evolutionary medicine is not high. Of course, this is extracted from mutant beasts after all. If the physical fitness is too weak, or there is some kind of immunodeficiency disease, there is still a very small chance that the vaccination will fail and cause death. Hearing this, some people who were excited before fell silent. It's tempting enough that evolution potions can make people stronger. However, if there is a possibility of death, this makes everyone involuntarily begin to weigh in their hearts. Seeing that everyone was silent, Zhou Zhu also guessed what these people were thinking. The expression on Zhou Zhu's face became a little anxious. Human nature is always inclined to seek safety. Few people choose to approach the unfamiliar if it is not necessary. Especially at this moment when everyone is hesitant, it is very likely that everyone will be resistant to inoculating evolutionary medicine. After a little thought, Zhou Zhu said aloud. Everyone, although inoculation with evolutionary medicine may cause death. But once you gain power, you will be able to get more chances of survival in the end times. Even if you can't become an evolutionary person, your physical fitness will improve, and you will be able to escape with a little more confidence in the event of a crisis. Speaking of this, Zhou Zhu's expression became frenzied. You will be the new humans. This is a great evolution for all human beings. After Zhou Zhu finished speaking, he opened the plastic cover that protected the needle. When everyone saw Zhou Zhu's actions, their expressions were a little puzzled. Everyone, if you still don't believe me, I am willing to be the first to be vaccinated. This is the product we have researched, and I have confidence in him. Saying that, Zhou Zhu stuck the needle in his arm. The blue liquid is slowly injected. Zhou Zhu's expression became a little distorted. Wait until the potion is fully infused. Zhou Zhu closed his eyes tightly and his body trembled slightly. Everyone in the audience could not help but become a little nervous. Staring at Zhou Zhu, he didn't dare to breathe. After a while, Zhou Zhu took a deep breath, and then stretched his muscles and bones. Crack. Crack. Accompanied by a burst of popping bean-like sound, Zhou Zuchang exhaled a turbid breath. Glancing at the people in front of him, Zhou Zhu smiled slightly. Then, bend your index finger and flick forward. Hey. With a sharp piercing sound, the person closest to Zhou Zhu tilted his head back and squatted on the ground with a squeak. Seeing this scene, everyone was in an uproar. Did he just fire a wind bomb? No way. Is the effect of this evolutionary potion so immediate? Everyone was a little excited. Zhou Zhu saw this, and the smile on his face became eager. Everyone, don't hesitate any longer. This is a great opportunity to change destiny. You have seen it, since I can succeed, there is no reason why you cannot succeed. Seeing this scene, among the crowd, Li Wen took a deep breath and then lifted his feet forward. I want to be vaccinated. On the other hand, seeing Li Wen's actions, Lin knew that all the resistance after that had been eliminated. Yu Zhou took the lead in demonstrating and successfully acquired the ability and became an evolutionary. This moment made a survivor bias in the hearts of everyone present. Lin knows very well that there is an inescapable gambling in human nature. Once you see a person succeed, then the subconscious instinct will also believe that you can do the same thing. Sure enough, the next moment, a group of people took action. After a while, in the huge venue, everyone walked to the nearest research institute and began to line up. Seeing that everyone started to inoculate the evolution potion, Lin secretly guarded his heart. Although evolutionary medicine can bring huge benefits, after all, there is a probability of mutation. At such times, protective work must be done to ensure the absolute safety of the entire shelter. Lin sighed, in fact. How is it possible that there is no mutation? Lin was thinking that the first batch of people, including Li Wen, had been vaccinated. After moving his body a little, Li Wen gently closed his eyes. When he opened it again, Li Wen's eyes instantly turned golden, and at the same time he exerted strength under his feet. In less than a blink of an eye, Li Wen appeared at the entrance of the venue. When you see this scene, the crowd is in an uproar again. He's become an evolutionary. My God, the effect of this medicine is too good. The expressions of the crowd became even more frenzied. Some people who had some resistance in their hearts completely forgot their previous worries at this time. After all, there was no abnormal reaction after the first batch of people were vaccinated. At this time, everyone's confidence was completely mobilized. In less than half an hour, in the huge venue, everyone was vaccinated. Glancing at the empty biochemical isolation box, Zhou Zhu walked up to Lin with a smile on his face. Mr. Lin, everyone has been vaccinated now. According to my statistics, among this group of people, the number of people with awakening ability to become evolutionaries accounts for about 7%. According to my previous experience at the Qianlong Research Institute, this ratio can be said to be quite good. Next, just wait another hour to confirm that there is no rejection among these people, and you can let them do their own thing. Lin nodded and was about to speak, but suddenly, Li Wen's body swayed and fell to the ground. The sudden change took everyone by surprise. Subconsciously, everyone's eyes were focused on Li Wen. Hearing the movement, Zhou Zhu also became nervous. Watching Li Wen fall to the ground, Zhou Zhu was nervous. Everyone be careful, don't get close to him. Just as he was talking, Li Wen stood up staggeringly. The turbid pupils are slightly dead fish white. Crawled with blue veins on the forehead, he's turned into a zombie. Someone exclaimed. Woolen cloth. Li Wen's mouth let out an unconscious murmur. Before waiting for Li Wen to move, Lin had already dodged and appeared directly in front of Li Wen. Without hesitation, Lin punched. Li Wen's head was like a bursting watermelon, red and white falling to the ground. Seeing this scene, everyone was horrified. He looked at Lin like a ghost. Soon, someone realized their situation and could not help but become a little nervous. How so? Did something go wrong with the medicine? Isn't Li Wen an evolver? How could he suddenly mutate? Just as he was talking, several people in the crowd fell down, and then they got up again. Lin didn't say a word, and solved these zombies. A thick smell of blood permeated the entire venue. At this time, everyone's faces were no longer excited, and they just silently looked at the headless corpse lying on the ground, with a sad expression on their faces. After completing the vaccination, everyone experienced the pleasure of becoming stronger brought about by a substantial increase in physical fitness. At this time, when they saw their companions who had fought side by side fall down, everyone's eyes were filled with grief. Li Wen's two friends quietly wiped away their tears. But what to do? If you don't inject medicine, how will you survive in this apocalypse? Everyone, stay more than 1 meter away from the people around you, don't walk around at will. Li Wen's expectations remain unchanged. Hearing the words, everyone did. Stand in the stadium and wait in silence for an hour. It wasn't until Zhou Zhu nodded to Lin that it was safe. Lin said aloud. It's all right, everyone, go and dispose of your companion's body. Everyone quickly cleaned up the mess on the ground and walked out of the venue with the corpse. After everyone left, the venue returned to silence. Lin glanced at Zhou Zhu and asked aloud. When will the next batch of potions be made? It should be soon. Zhou Zhu said aloud. Everyone is working overtime now. At the current rate, we only need 1 to 2 days to vaccinate everyone in the entire Dawning Institute. Speaking of which, Zhou Zhu asked aloud. Mr. Lin, after the inoculation is completed, will the remaining medicine be transported to the Qianlong Research Institute? Lin nodded. Part of it needs to be transported, and part of it needs to be sent to other shelters. Zhou Yu nodded. Since that's the case, then I'll make preparations first. Good. 2 days later, outside the Dawning Research Institute, all the members of the Dawning Research Institute gathered together with a heavy expression on their faces. In front of everyone, a tombstone stands. Lin stood at the forefront, silent. Zhou Zhu stood beside Lin, glanced behind him worriedly, and said in a low voice. Mr. Lin, everyone's mood is not high now, do you want to say something to cheer them up? No. Lin shook his head and said, they have recovered. What? Zhou Zhu was slightly taken aback and turned his head subconsciously. I saw that although everyone's faces were still sad, their eyes were firm. We are the last hope of mankind. Yeah, we can't just go down like this. I must continue to walk with the will of my companions until the end of this apocalypse. Let's all act. Don't waste time, everyone said, and they dispersed one by one in an orderly manner. Seeing this scene, Zhou Zhu was slightly shocked for a moment. This situation has happened countless times in the Qianlong Research Institute. It's just that it's different here. There used to be a considerable number of people who had been together day and night with their companions who were unacceptable after they died from inoculation. Some people even have antisocial personalities, causing a lot of trouble for Qianlong Research Institute. With the lessons learned, Zhou Zhu naturally did not dare to neglect. But at this time, Zhou Zhu was a little unbelievable to find that everyone had completed their self-regulation and started to work on their own affairs. Are these people's will so strong? After a brief silence, Zhou Zhu felt a little emotional. As expected, Mr. Lin, you have collected elites from all over the world. Just this powerful mentality adjustment ability has surpassed those ordinary people in Qianlong Research Institute by too many. Speaking of this, Zhou Zhu clenched his fists with a serious expression. Mr. Lin, what should we do next? Go back and continue producing potions, Lin said. Next, the number of evolutionary potions required will be huge. Yes, Mr. Lin. A week later, at the entrance of the Dawning Research Institute, everyone pushed the carts and pushed the metal-cased boxes to the transporter. Liu Yao stood beside Lin, glanced at everyone's communication, and asked aloud. Lin, are we going to deliver medicine to other shelters now? Yes. Lin said. In addition to the potions, there are some mutated crops. With that said, Lin's eyes fell on the distant skyline. The plan is about to begin. A nuclear strike will come soon. By that time, nuclear winter will cover the entire land. At the same time, transportation tasks will no longer be as easy as they are now. After all, except for humans and those zombies, there are also huge and uncontrolled mutant herds in the world. By then, there will be a lack of clean water and a stable source of food above the wasteland. The aggressiveness and ferocity of these mutant beasts will greatly increase. Not only that, when the nuclear winter comes, there will be a huge amount of radiation dust accompanying the nuclear winter. Under the double attack, the mutant beasts living outside will enter a new round of elimination. This kind of general elimination will inevitably lead to a brutal round of killing. At that time, the mutant beasts that can survive will have a high probability of secondary mutation. In the current situation, Lin communicated with mutant beasts and controlled them by means of this animal language. However, when the nuclear winter comes, in addition to the animals that he has mastered now, the remaining animals may become extremely ferocious and difficult to control. While thinking about it, Zhou Zhu raised his foot and walked to Lin. With a smile on his face, Zhou Zhu said, Mr. Lin, we have finished loading the goods. Shall we leave now? Lin retracted his thoughts. Let's go. Soon, the transport plane took off slowly and headed to the Qianlong Research Institute. Lin sits on a fixed seat in the rear of the cockpit. There was no abnormal change in sight. Lin sent Jin Yu the task of escort by telepathy, then turned and left the cockpit. After entering the transport cabin, Lin suddenly heard Zhou Zhuzheng and others discussing in a low voice in the transport plane before he could sit down. You said, is it a return home for us to run back like this time? Ha ha ha, of course. At the moment, we not only have new instruments in the Dawning Refuge, and increase the production of medicine, but also absorb the evolution medicine at the same time. Among those of us who went to the Dawning Sanctuary, the number of evolutionaries is not small. I really want to take a look after I go back. What kind of eyes will those former companions look at us? Everyone was talking, and in the crowd, Zhou Zhu noticed that Lin was coming. When he stopped talking, a smile appeared on Zhou Zhu's face. Mr. Lin, is there anything you need to tell us? Lin shook his head and found a relatively comfortable place to sit down. Go alone in the cockpit and watch. If something goes wrong, please let me know and I'll take a break. Alright, Mr. Lin. Zhou Zhu nodded and found the two of them to go to the cockpit. Soon, the transport plane approached the Qianlong Research Institute. This time, the journey to Qianlong Research Institute was very smooth. Along the way, there was no attack from any mutant bird flock. When the transportation can be opened, everyone will walk down one after another. When Lin saw the senior management of Qianlong Research Institute, he had already brought many people to wait at the door of the transport aircraft. When Zhou Zhu saw the leader, the expression on his face was a little surprised. Shu Zi, I didn't expect you to come in person. Hearing Zhou assistant's words, the man named Shu Zi couldn't help shaking his head and said, I now belong to the mountain where there are no tigers, and the monkey is called the king. Since you all left, my promotion speed is even faster than rocket. Having said this, Jin Yu's gaze passed over Zhou Zhu and landed on Linen. Mr. Lin, you are finally here. Everyone is waiting for you at the base. We'll talk about it later. Linen said, let's load and unload the goods first. Shu Zi nodded. Okay. After a while, everyone moved like ants. By category, some standing materials, including pharmacy practices and drugs, will be transported to the Qianlong Research Institute. In the hall of the Qianlong Research Institute, a lot of people have gathered at this time. Watching everyone place various sizes of supplies on the open space one after another, everyone's eyes straightened, and they couldn't help discussing in a low voice. No way, how long has it been since then, has the Dawning Refuge transported the supplies? Are these people too efficient, or that Linen has determined from the beginning that his trip this time will definitely be able to attract people, so he has prepared materials in advance? I think the latter is more likely. After all, this person's methods are so powerful, and it should be expected that he can successfully take away the instruments and people from the Qianlong Research Institute. While everyone was talking, Lu Chengfeng ran over with a few deputies. Seeing Lin and who was supervising the loading and unloading of goods, Changfeng Lu showed a smile on his face. Mr. Lin, you are here, said. Changfeng Lu glanced at the large and small boxes in front of him, and the expression on his face became a little strange. It seems that this time Dawn Refuge brought us not only food and medicine, but also other things. Not bad. Linen said, in addition to these, there are some mutant plants that have been cultivated into seedlings. Some of these plants can pass through. Their own evolutionary system produces a lot of pure water. There are also several plants that produce secretions that can be used as fuel. Having said that, Linen added another sentence. Plants' fuels are primarily liquid vegetable oils. You just need to purify it a little bit with the process, and you can supply it as an alternative to gasoline for internal combustion engines. It's just a little bit difficult if you want diesel. On one side, Lu Chengfeng's eyes widened, his expression unbelievable. After Lin finished speaking, Lu Chengfeng shuddered and recovered. The expression on his face became excited. Lu Chengfeng said aloud. No, Mr. Lin, you have already helped a lot. Speaking of this, Shu Zi's eyes looking at the container became more and more hot. The Qianlong Research Institute does not have the capacity to produce gasoline. There is also no oil extraction equipment. So far, in addition to the inventory, there are gasoline and diesel collected from surrounding gas stations and oil depots. The main fuel source of Qianlong Research Institute has already been prepared by chemical reactions in other ways. The first time he heard Lin say that there are mutant plants that can produce plant fuel, Shu Zi already began to subconsciously calculate in his heart. After these plants start production, the raw materials that can be saved in the Qianlong Research Institute. Subsequently, Shu Zi was greatly excited by the results obtained. The various materials saved can save the cost of Qianlong Research Institute 20% or more. In addition, there are mutant plants that can purify the water source and can also partially replace the water purifier inside the Qianlong Research Institute. In this way, various materials, including carbon, can save a fortune. Shu Zi didn't dare to neglect, and looked at Zheng's crowd with a solemn expression. Don't be stunned, everyone, hurry up and help. Remember to transport the mutant plants that can produce fuel and water to the experimental field for planting. Wait until the new areas are planned later, and then transplant them. Hearing Lu Chengfeng's words, everyone present was in an uproar. A group of people widened their eyes in disbelief. Although Lin left, everyone also heard about Lin bringing mutant plants through various channels. It's just that everyone didn't have an intuitive feeling about it, so they only regarded this matter as a talk after dinner and didn't take it to heart. At this time, hearing Lu Chengfeng say that the mutated plants can actually provide fuel and purify water, the hearts of everyone present were beyond shock. If Lin can bring these plants, doesn't it mean that there is a lot of surplus fuel and various kinds of food in the Dawning Refuge? Even more exaggerated, can those people in the Dawning Refuge take a bath every half a month? Just as the thoughts in his heart came to his mind, Shu Zi walked quickly to Zhou Zhu's side and said in a low voice, can you guys take a shower every 10 days and a half months? 10 days and a half months. Zhou Zhu glanced at Shu Zi beside him, and the expression on his face was quite interesting. You too underestimate the Dawning Refuge. We were in the research room and could take a shower every day if we wanted to. Speaking of this, Zhou Zhu took a deep breath. Not only that, but I have become an evolutionary person through medicine. Xu Zi was accompanied by many senior officials of the Qianlong Research Institute. Hearing what Zhou Zhu said at this time, a group of people from the Qianlong Research Institute looked at each other in dismay, and even looked at Xu Zi with a bit of envy and jealousy in their eyes. Before Lin came, these people who were present in the Qianlong Research Institute often received news from scattered refugees outside. Even if I didn't think about it deliberately, I learned about the miserable life of other camps without food and clothing. These people also more or less have some sense of superiority in their hearts because of the contrast. However, since Lin came over, the sense of superiority in these people's hearts has disappeared. Compared with talents, Lin's Dawn Refuge must have gathered talents from many places. Compared with technology, Lin simply moved a few times, and the transport plane was modified to the point where everyone in the Qianlong Research Institute could not understand. Even today, where clean fresh water is scarce, an ordinary person in the Dawning Refuge can take a bath every day. These kinds of things made everyone's envious eyes turn a little red. For a time, the eyes of everyone looking at Lin became a little hot. Soon, members including the executives of Qianlong Research Institute came to Lin to besiege the city. Aware of these people's movements and eyes, Lin naturally guessed the thoughts of these people. In contrast, they are very envious of the life of the Dawning Refuge and want to join the Dawning Refuge. It's just that these people just saw the good life in Dawning Refuge. After the comparison, I have a strong mentality in my heart. You don't need to think too much to know that these people don't really care about the existence of the Dawning Refuge itself, and the huge vision that they said before. Sure enough, the Qianlong Research Institute executive closest to Lin said, "Can Mr. Lin let me join the Dawning Refuge?" As soon as the voice fell, it was like a spark falling into a gasoline barrel. The expressions of the others in the back also became frenzied. "Mr. Lin, please let me join. Mr. Lin, I am very longing for the Dawning Refuge, and I also want to contribute my strength to mankind. You push me to explore a group of people, and for a while, the scene is very lively." Beside Lin, Lu Yao said with a wrinkled nose, "You guys, when I heard Lin invite you all before, all of them were reluctant. Now that you see the Dawn Refuge, you are clamoring to join, are you ashamed?" The executives of Qianlong Research Institute, headed by them, blushed. However, he still said it out loud. As the high-level executives of the Qianlong Research Institute, what we do must be for the sake of everyone. Dawning, since the sanctuary has shown its potential and ability, it is only natural for us to change our decision at this time, right? The voice fell, and everyone behind him agreed. Lu Yao wanted to say more, but was stopped by Lin with his eyes. Glancing at the people in front of him, Lin pointed at some of the elites of Qianlong Research Institute who had not followed the others before and said aloud, "You can join in." Although the Dawning Refuge has supplemented the talents of the Qianlong Research Institute, there is still a shortage of various types of technical jobs. Some of these people are not good at speaking, and are somewhat snobbish. However, it is extremely difficult to survive in this apocalypse. Lin Andao didn't even bother with these people. Soon, the cargo loading and unloading was completed. Seeing that the goal was achieved, Lin did not intend to chat with the others in the Qianlong Research Institute, and turned and left with everyone. In the Qianlong Research Institute, the rest of the people looked at the people who left, with envy and jealousy in their eyes. When Lin and others left, the atmosphere in the Qianlong Research Institute seemed a little silent. Everyone in the Qianlong Research Institute was in a low mood, and their expressions also seemed a little sluggish. I really didn't expect that there were so many benefits in the Dawning Refuge. If I knew this was the case, I should have gone with the others in the first place. One suddenly complained. The others around him were also remorseful, but they didn't say much, and silently walked to the front to help carry the goods. The other side. The transporter landed steadily. Stepping out of the cabin, Lin thought for a while and set his eyes on Lu Yao. His eyes became gentler, and Lin said, "I need your help with something." Hear Lin's words. Lu Yao smiled. "Okay, is there anything for me to do?" Lin glanced at the direction of the Dawning Refuge and said aloud, "I plan to go to Ark Island now, and I don't have time to go to other shelters for the time being. You go and arrange a few people to deliver the supplies in succession." Hearing Lin's words, Lu Yao nodded, said with a smile, "I got it," turned and left. After Lu Zan left, Lin turned around and walked to the other side of the Dawning Refuge. After a while, Lin found Zheng Lituan in the lounge. Seeing Lin, Zheng Li's eyes lit up and smiled. "Lin, why are you here?" Lin nodded. Ark Island is about to start building, and now it needs your ability. Hearing Lin An's words, Zheng Li nodded. Since that's the case, let's go now. Well, but before that, we need to find some other helpers. Anyone else? Zheng Dang's expression was a little strange, and then there was a slight smile on his face. Standing up and approaching Lin An, Zheng Li exhaled like blue. What's the matter? Am I not enough by myself? You still want to find other people? Sure enough, men are greedy creatures. Lin An was unmoved by Zheng Li's sudden reaction and just looked at Zheng Li silently. Seeing that Lin An didn't respond, a flash of disappointment flashed in Zheng Li's eyes. But soon, the whole person returned to normal. Let's go, get things done as soon as possible, and I can be freed. Lin An heard the words, turned around and walked out. Looking at Lin An's back, Zheng Li's eyes became a little the same, and she raised her heels as she muttered something in her mouth. Lonely Island. Everyone stood on a relatively high hill on Guizhou Island. A group of people looked at the wild scene on the island in front of them, and the expressions on their faces were a little embarrassed. In the crowd, Fang Wen frowned, a little puzzled on his face. Before the end of the world, Fang Wen was a civil engineer who studied building materials. Therefore, after hearing that Lin An was going to start the construction of Guizhou Island, Fang Wen felt that his profession finally had a role to play. So, he volunteered to come and help. Only however, when everyone started to leave, Fang Wen realized that he had thought things simple. Not only did they not have any large-scale machinery for excavating mountains. Even some of the most basic earth and rock excavators are not ready. The expression on his face was a little helpless and puzzled, and Fang Wen was puzzled. If you only rely on these ordinary small machines, you can make concrete purely semi-manually without large concrete mixers. It will take at least 2 to 3 years to make a shelter of sufficient size. Not only that, the lack of large-scale equipment to reinforce the foundation can only be regarded as the standard of civil construction at best, and it cannot meet the military standard at all. Not to mention military-grade shelters. Thinking of this, Fang Wen couldn't help shaking his head and sighing. That's not good. Hearing the sound, Lin An turned his head and looked over. Looking at each other, Fang Wen's expression became a little nervous. Mr. Lin, I have no other intentions. Before he finished speaking, Lin An suddenly spoke. You are an expert in civil engineering, and your advice is needed here. My preconceived idea is to open a watchtower here similar to an outpost in order to get the best view and signal reception. What do you think should be done to make the whole fortification reach the most solid level, taking into account the premise of the above requirements? Hearing the question, Fang Wen frowned and said aloud. Mr. Lin, I personally don't mean to blame you. But right now we are in a solid rocky area. In this kind of place, you want to carve out a facility that is strong enough. We need a lot of concrete to hollow out most of the mountain below. And pour concrete into it. Also, the Cape Mountain project is lengthy. Even with large machinery it can take months. What's more, we only have some small instruments now. Hearing Fang Wen's words, the expressions of some people who were originally excited became a little hesitant. Indeed, as Fang Wen said, if you want to make qualified fortifications, you must have good tools. After all, it is difficult for a clever woman to cook without rice. When these people came with Lin An before, they just wanted to do a lot. At this time, Fang Wen reminded everyone to realize the problem. At this moment, Lin An turned to look at Zheng Li. Zheng Li suddenly smiled softly. There are thousands of styles in the eyes. What? Do you know that I'm okay now? Lin An had no feeling for this kind of teasing, just said, then it's up to you. Seeing that Lin An did not continue, Zheng Li felt bored and stopped talking, and turned to Fang Wen. Being stared at by a woman with a delicate face, Fang Wen's breathing couldn't help but speed up slightly. Zheng Li's expression changed when he noticed the change in Fang Wen's expression. The smile on his face became a little playful. Zheng Li was about to speak, when Lin An suddenly said, stop playing, our time is very tight. Zheng Li's eyes flickered, knowing that what Lin An said was the truth. Converging the expression on his face, Zheng Li said, actually, the problem you mentioned is easy to solve. Saying that, Zheng Li bent down slightly and pressed her hand to the ground. The next moment, everyone noticed that the ground beneath their feet began to tremble slightly. I saw that the rocks around the crowd were under the control of invisible forces, and they began to distort and deform as if they had their own will. A group of people couldn't help but widen their eyes. Under the watchful eyes of all, A large amount of earth and stones were borne from the ground and entangled with each other. Within minutes, this small hill formed the general framework of the building. What? Fang Wen's eyes widened in disbelief. I thought that the construction difficulty this time would be an upward climb of the geometric index. As a result, who would have thought that this beautiful woman was full of feminine temperament in front of her? It turned out that he simply put his hand on the land, and it took several months or even longer to complete the work. On the other hand, the others were also dumbfounded, looking at Zhang Dang like a ghost. It's too exaggerated. Is this the power of the evolutionary? No. I'm also an evolutionary. Why don't I have such a perverted method? Hearing the words, Zheng Li took the time to smile at everyone. After about 10 minutes, the tremors on the ground slowly stopped. Putting his hand back, Zheng Li glanced at the buildings in front of him with a slight smile on his face. I don't know exactly how you plan to design this place. I'm just building a rough outline. If you need it later, modify it as needed. No, this should be enough. Fang Wen muttered to himself, staring at the building frame in front of him. I just don't know how strong the building is. With that said, Fang Wen took out the instrument from the satchel he was carrying, and walked over with his feet raised. Fang Wen exclaimed while exploring with the instrument beside the building frame. How is that possible? These buildings are stronger than poured concrete. As the most commonly used building material, concrete is not the hardest material. However, because it is very difficult to obtain, and its strength exceeds that of most materials found in nature, it is favored in the construction industry. However, this woman in front of her has prepared such a high-strength material so easily through the ability of an evolutionary. And the things used are all locally sourced, and no precious resources are added to them. In Fang Wen's view, this is really too much. After thinking about it in his heart, Fang Wen had to turn all his emotions into one sentence. These people that Mr. Lin found can't be measured by common sense. To sort out his emotions, Fang Wen took a deep breath and quickly entered the working state. While discussing with Zhang Li to continuously optimize the building structure of Ark Island, he began to construct other buildings according to the terrain. Seeing that the construction work was on track, Lin stopped paying attention, and instead led a group of people to the edge of the island. Following Lin, a group of people looked puzzled and discussed in a low voice. Where are we going now? Are we not here to help? I don't know. With that big beauty here, we can only be used as decorations. Stop talking, we seem to be going to the beach. Everyone saw that they were getting closer and closer to the beach, and soon, someone bravely walked up to Lin. Mr. Lin, shouldn't we hurry up and finish the construction on Ark Island now? Looking like you are now taking us to the edge of the island? That's right. Lin said, I need to arm the beach and make the first line of defense. Hearing Lin's words, everyone looked at each other with puzzled expressions. The edge of the beach is basically some granular quartz, as well as ordinary sand. There is no way to build fortifications in such a place, and it is impossible to install any fixtures. At this time, Zheng Li is assisting Fang Wen in setting up functional buildings and houses, and it is unlikely that he will come to the edge of the island to help. After thinking about it, everyone still didn't understand what Lin wanted to do. Do you want us to be guards there, Mr. Lin? Someone asked suspiciously. The person next to him shook his head. I'm not sure, but since Mr. Lin took us there, we'll know what to do when we get there. Let's stop discussing it, and focus on what's in front of you. While talking, everyone walked to the beach. With a thought, Lin opened the virtual space. After searching inside for a while, Lin picked out all the mutant seeds that he wanted to use. After doing this, Lin turned around and distributed the seeds in his hands to the people with puzzled expressions. You sow the seeds along the island. These seeds can grow on their own by absorbing seawater, Lin said. In the future, the defense of Ark Island's periphery will rely on these plant seeds. Hearing Lin's words, everyone suddenly realized. But soon, everyone's faces became a little puzzled. Although I have long heard that Lin has the means to mutate plant seeds. However, no one has seen the plant seeds that can absorb seawater to grow. A group of people instinctively want to ask questions. Just a mouth. Thinking of the scene that Fang Wen encountered before, everyone pressed the idea in their hearts, and successively distributed the seeds they brought into each person's hands. In the crowd, Li Fei reached out and took the seeds. Glancing at the green spindle-shaped seeds, Li Fei couldn't help but mutter to himself. Mr. Lin left the building and didn't supervise it, but he wanted to call us over and put plant seeds here. Let's not say how long the growth cycle of these plants will take. Even if they grow, will these seeds be more powerful than aircraft cannons? With that said, Li Fei dug a hole in the sand and threw the seeds into it. After stepping on a few feet and compacting the sand, Li Feizhong turned to leave. Kakaka. Suddenly, a small sound attracted Li Fei's attention. Stopping and turning around, Li Fei saw that there was a small bulge raised in the sand. And that bulging position just happened to be where he had just planted the seeds. The expression on his face became a little puzzled. Li Fei said to himself. It's strange, could it be that I just buried the seeds in the place where the crabs buried in the sand? As he spoke, the small bulge in front of him swelled even more. Soon, the sandy soil separates from left to right. A small sapling emerged from the sand. Although this sapling is young, it already has a curved tip like an ancient red-clothed cannon at its tip. Although the plant has no eyes, it is very humane to turn the top to Li Fei. It seemed that after staring at Li for a moment, the plant realigned its tip to the sea. Seeing this scene, Li Fei made a wooden stool pocket. What's the situation? Is this growing out? Li Fei stared straight at the small plant. In such a stunned time, the plant in front of him actually grew taller. At this time, the height of the plant has reached Li Fei's ankle. At the same time, bursts of exclamations came from other places. Damn, what is this? Is this growing too fast? At this speed, it wouldn't take just one day for this thing to grow into a towering tree. Hearing the words of these people, Li Fei came back to his senses. Turning his head and looking at Lin, who was standing there with a calm expression, Li Fei couldn't help but mutter to himself. Mr. Lin is Mr. Lin, and it's incredible to take out anything casually. After speaking, Li Fei took the seeds and continued to sow. The day passed quickly. In the evening, everyone regrouped in front of Linen. At this time, the mutant plants had grown to a height of about 2 meters in the place where the seeds were first sown. Everyone saw that the stems of these mutant plants were at least as thick as 2 people hugging each other. At the same time, the muzzle-like shape at the top also swayed left and right like a radar. The expressions on everyone's faces were curious. In the crowd, Li Fei couldn't bear it. Approaching Lin, he lowered his voice. Mr. Lin, can't let us see how these plants defend themselves. I've thought about it for a long time, but I can't imagine how these plants can defend against invaders. Can you demonstrate if it is convenient? Okay. Lin said, his mind moved. With telepathy, Lin manipulated a plant in front of him and aimed the end like a muzzle at the sea in the distance. Afterwards, everyone saw that the sturdy rhizome of the mutant plant in front of them bulged a large bag from the root. The moving speed of the big bag was so fast that it took less than a breath to reach the top of the muzzle. Gudong. With a swallowing sound, the top of the muzzle swelled up in a circle. Then, with a crisp sound, a mass of jelly flew out from the muzzle. This mass of jelly is fast. By the time everyone reacted, the jelly had already turned into a streamlined shape and flew over a distance of thousands of meters. The moment it landed on the sea, the gelatinous substance split apart instantly and burst with a bang. It turned out to be a special kind of fruit that would explode upon impact. At this time, everyone was in an uproar. This thing looks very powerful. Yeah, in such a blink of an eye, it flew so far. If it were faster, I wouldn't be able to catch it. Looking at the power, I'm afraid it has caught up with the anti-material rifle. No wonder Mr. Lin wants to use this plant as a means of defense. This thing doesn't need to rest all day, and its power is so powerful. With the existence of this thing, we can save a lot of trouble in the future. Suddenly, Li Fei said abruptly from the side. It only took a day for this thing to grow to this height. And it looks like it will continue to grow. When he is fully formed, how powerful will this mutant plant be? Is there really anything else that can invade in the future? The expressions of everyone became a little happy. They looked at each other, and when they looked at each other, they could see the shock in each other's eyes, and then there was a bit of awe in Lin An's eyes. Lin An ignored these people, looked up at the sky, and then said, "It's not too early, let's do it here today. After coming tomorrow, there are other plant seeds that you need to bury according to the original plan." After distributing the tasks, Lin An left alone. At this moment, the construction of Guzhou Island has begun to bear fruit. At least, each evolutionary person already has his own room. Lin An originally planned to save some resources, just squeeze with Lu Yao and the others, but it's a pity, except for Yin Xiaoxiao, who looks like you have the final say, and the murderous eyes of the other 2 girls. Let him be honest, really wasted construction resources. Back in the room, Lin An's thoughts moved. Do you want to enable simulation? Lin calmed down and exhaled softly. Turn on. Doomsday simulation has been opened. Currently optional talents. The selection is complete. Simulation starts. November 11th. The nuclear bomb strikes. You and the others in the base stand on the highest point of Ark Island, looking at the dazzling light like a solar flare in the distance. Your hearts are a little heavy. Even though the huge shock wave is far away from the explosion point, it can still see the waves rolling, making the waves continue fiercely. Because of the prejudgment, you have not been affected too much. Guizhou Island is running smoothly and everything is going on in an orderly manner. November 12th. Guizhou Island is running smoothly, and the surface fortifications are undergoing a final inspection. November 13th. You received information. It seems that someone has discovered unusual changes under the sea, and you will investigate after you receive the news. After finding out that there is no abnormality, you are thoughtful. On December 30th, there was a change in the ocean. A large number of mutated murlocs flocked to the land. The strength of mutated murlocs is very powerful, and the number is huge. January 1st. You successfully repelled the murloc attack. Since the murlocs are not afraid of death, you have suffered heavy losses. January 2nd. The murlocs discovered the Dawning Refuge and launched an attack. You received a call for help from the Dawning Refuge, put down the repair work at hand, and brought people to support. After a hard fight, with the support of the mutant herd, you successfully protected most of the survivors in the Dawning Refuge. Looking at the devastated Dawn Sanctuary, you frowned. The murloc's strength is far more powerful than you imagined. Seeing this, Lin frowned, realizing that something was not normal. Judging from the simulation feedback, it seems that I have more trouble. Under the influence of radiation, the fish people, who were originally only used as nutrient and spare food, seem to have mutated and evolved far beyond their imagination. If it continues, in about a month, this will actually happen in the real world. It seems that we have to find a way to nip the hidden danger in the cradle. Even if it can't be solved completely, we must find ways to minimize the threat. Realizing this, Lin frowned slightly. Although a decision has been made, there is no clue as to how to implement Lin. After watching the simulation again, Lin was thoughtful. He sat quietly in his room, lying on the somewhat shabby bed, staring at the ceiling, and gradually came up with ideas in his head. The murlocs will attack aggressively and cause a lot of damage to us in a short period of time. Someone must be behind them, that is to say, like mutant zombies, they have a commander. Since there is a leader, before these murlocs find that they have assembled into a climate, it is better to attack directly and conduct a beheading operation. As long as the top of the murloc's head is removed, without the leader's command and dispatch, the murlocs will not be able to assemble on their own. It is even possible that they will continue to fight each other in the deep sea. As long as the overall number is reduced and scheduling is lost, these murlocs will no longer be a threat. Thinking of this, Lin stood up. It seems that the preparations for the fortifications have been accelerated. Ocean security issues, it should be sooner rather than later, and cutting the mess quickly is the correct solution to the current predicament. Without any hesitation, Lin started another simulation. But in this simulation, he failed to find the commander of the murlocs in the ocean, and only found out some clues after the nuclear explosion. It seems that it is not realistic to kill the murloc leader before the second mutation. There is a high probability that the murloc leader officially awakened after the nuclear explosion. We will have to wait until the aftermath of the nuclear bomb strike has passed before we can find another way. Thinking of this, Lin sat down again and watched the contents of the simulator deduce secretly in his mind. After a while, he let out a sigh of relief and relaxed. Afterwards, rubbing his brows and pondering for a moment, Lin walked to the beach alone. The waves on the island of Lonely Island crashed against the shore, and the sound of the waves made Lin's mood gradually calm down. Finally, it's coming, this day. Lin let go of his thoughts and watched the waves quietly. Everything slowed down, which made him suddenly feel a little emotional. Before I knew it, I had come here. Starting from a small county town, he has overcome difficulties all the way, until now, he finally has his own base and has formed his own forces. In addition, it has saved many people and solved many crises. The apocalypse no longer made him feel extremely desperate, and even, he seemed to be able to see the dawn of hope. Staring blankly at the waves, he stretched out his hand, and the black tentacles on his hand appeared and disappeared slightly. How long until it ends? Lin emptied his mind and enjoyed a brief moment of peace. Suddenly, footsteps came from behind. He instinctively turned his head to look, saw Yingyao who was warming his hands and tiptoe, and stuck his head out behind him. Seeing him turn his head to look back, Lu Yao just stuck out his tongue and smiled naughty. I know I can't hide it from you. She walked over to Linen with ease, and sat on the beach with him carelessly. What's the matter? I rarely see you like this recently. Linen smiled. What? Lu Yao was entangled, hesitated for a moment, and made a conclusion. It's normal? Normal look? Linen wondered for a moment, then suddenly. After being silent for a while, he suddenly said in a low voice, I'm sorry. I've been too busy during this time, he said, but Lu Yao just smiled and shook his head. I'm not blaming you. She breathed a sigh of relief and, like Linen, looked at the beach lazily. It's just that you were. Just like a robot. Linen hummed and looked at the beach together. After a while, he chuckled twice. Indeed, like a robot. When did it start? Probably from the Qianlong Sanctuary. The villains in the third-rate novels began to emerge. I seem to be a little out of order. I only care about moving forward with my plan, but I have less and less relationship with the people around me, but there is nothing I can do. November 11th seems to be imminent. Whenever he thinks of nuclear explosions, mutant zombies, mutants, and the crisis in the deep sea, Linen has a sense of urgency as if he is not waiting for me. In this way, it really looks like a robot that keeps advancing according to the program. He turned his head and looked at Lu Yao with extremely sincere eyes. I'm sorry. Lu Yao was a little uncomfortable with his sudden attitude, and turned his eyes away. Why are you saying sorry to me? If you want to say sorry, you should also tell Xiao Zhang. Anyway, Xiao Xiao definitely has no opinion. During this time she accompanied you to make a splash in the eyes of those people. What's more, she has always been what you say. Why does this sound sour? Linen couldn't help laughing, reached out and touched her head. What's the matter? Her hair was messed up and she glared at Linen with an angry look, but he reached out and took it into his arms, struggled a few times, and then didn't move. It's just that the ears are slightly red, and after a while, there is fog in the eye sockets. Indeed, they were somewhat left out. Especially this time, I will also hand over the delivery of supplies to other shelters to the girls. Although Linen decided to let them do it alone after confirming their safety with the simulator in advance. But after all, this is the first time since the end of the world that a group of people have been separated for such a long time. Now that they are about to be separated, Linen is still alone at the beach. For the girl who likes him, what he wants is not any company or help, but he doesn't even care a little, and he still seems a little indifferent. If you don't want to send supplies to other shelters, you might as well stay. Linen suddenly changed her mind. It's not that no one is available. From the previous simulation process, the process of donating supplies to other shelters this time is very safe, as long as an evolutionary person can be competent for this task. It's just that when he plans or acts, he always subconsciously asks the people closest to him to do it. Now I calm down and examine myself, but I find that doing so may not be a good thing. I want those other evolutionaries to come in, not to eat dry rice. If you encounter something, no matter how big or small, you should let the people around you do it. Then why do you recruit other helpers? Ah. No. I can do it. Lu Yao suddenly became anxious, as if he didn't want him to misunderstand. She broke free from her arms earnestly, looked at Linen and said, what can I do for you? Whether it's Xiao Xiao, Xiao Zhang, or me, are all willing. I know. Linen smiled and looked at her with a narrow look. It's just that this time may be the only free period. After the nuclear explosion, I am afraid that there will be an endless stream of things to do. If you don't seize the opportunity now, then I'm afraid you'll have to blame me for being a robot again. After he finished speaking, seeing Lu Yao lowered his head, he couldn't help but leaned over and lightly touched her forehead. I haven't had a good talk with you for a long time. Let's just be lazy together these few days. Lin En's words undoubtedly made Lu Yao a little moved. She pursed her lips, and after a while, she whispered, it's not that I don't want to go. I know. Lin En smiled and patted her head, telling her not to think about it. The two were snuggling by the sea, and after a while, Lin En got up and stretched. Then you go to Xiaozhang and Xiao Xiao, so that they don't have to prepare to leave. I will pick another group of people to be responsible for the transfer of materials. After a pause, Lin En added, you can also take a breath. If you have any opinions or requirements on the construction of Lonely Island, you can also tell me, or you can go to Zheng Dang yourself. Because of his unique ability, Zheng Li now has a considerable right to speak in the construction of houses, fortifications and facilities. If not, who else can build so many buildings in a short period of time besides her? Even Lin En has been polite to her lately. He has always been pragmatic. As long as it is useful to him, then everyone is friends. Zhang Li is also aware of Lin An's thoughts, but she is reluctant, or in other words, being needed by Lin An and showing her own value is the result she wants to get. When Lu Yao heard Zheng Dang's name, her expression was a little complicated. Your relationship with her seems to be getting better and better recently. Don't think about it. Lin An rolled his eyes, rubbed her head viciously, and messed up her hair again. Before she gave herself a head in embarrassment, she left gracefully. In short, that's it. During this time, the construction of Guzhou Island is up to you. What about you? Lu Yao couldn't help asking. Lin An blinked. The robot needs to be oiled. As soon as these words came out, Lu Yao's face turned red. Lin An looked at her suspiciously, always feeling that the girl's head didn't seem normal, and she didn't just think of something. But he didn't break it, just smiled. It's still very rare to rely on Zheng Li alone to support the construction of Guzhou Island. The mutated plants from the architecture department that I used before have to be used, and of course, they have to be transformed. Fortunately, among the evolutionaries we have recently absorbed, there are many abilities that can be used for construction. I have to be a good overseer, lest the group of people not know what to do. After he finished speaking, he paused, and then said, also, I have to do some preparations. What preparation? Lu Yao asked suspiciously. Lin An just smiled and didn't tell the whole story, but she still hinted that she should be mentally prepared. End this damn doomsday. Lu Yao was taken aback by his words, and then, silently clenched his fists, his eyes became firm. Hey. Although I don't know why Lin An made this statement. Since he said it. Then he can do it. Lin An said he did what he said. The preparations for the transport plane and materials were ready. He just changed a group of people in charge, and the matter was still pushed forward. In fact, it did, although those who joined Lonely Island in the beginning were still a little worried. But everyone knows that since they have joined Lonely Island, a place that seems to be safer than any sanctuary at present, they must have responsibilities and obligations that they must undertake. After Zhang Qingshui and Yin Xiaoxiao learned that they did not need to be responsible for the transportation of the transport plane, they were surprised and worried, and finally found Lin An by coincidence. At this moment, Lin An is strengthening the equipment in the research institute that is being rebuilt. At present, his strengthening ability is getting stronger and stronger with the help of spiritual energy and thinking acceleration ability. From his initial seemingly incongruous fantasy, it seems that there is a possibility of realization. In fact, Lin An began to wonder if it was possible to strengthen his motorcycle into a small transformer. Even a simple control system like a transport aircraft can enhance the ability to take off and land vertically, so it seems that your motorcycle can't be magically transformed into a single-person aircraft, right? Mr. Lin, it always feels that the data is somewhat inaccurate during the operation of this device. A researcher found Lin An. Lin An just walked over to check it, and then gave a reply. It's not that the data given by the equipment is inaccurate, it's too accurate. This machine is now more precise than before, and the data given will only be more detailed than before. The researcher was stunned for a moment, then muttered to himself. No wonder, the previous experiments have been failing. Thank you, Mr. Lin. After the researcher simply thanked him, he threw himself into the research process. In this research institute, which seems to be much simpler than the underground research institute before, it can be said that it is a mudhouse. The research atmosphere has not weakened at all. Lin An circled around, and there was nothing that he could interfere with. Finally, just as he was about to go out, he met Yin Xiaoxiao and Zhang Qingshui head-on. Zhang Qingshui looked at Lin An with inexplicable eyes. You find someone else to be in charge of material delivery, is there anything you want us to do? Lin An looked puzzled. No. Zhang Qingshui and Yin Xiaoxiao looked at each other and said nothing. Lin An suddenly realized. It turned out that Zhang Qingshui and Yin Xiaoxiao had accumulated a lot of resentment in their hearts during this period of time. It is inappropriate to say that it is resentment. Probably, it is some lovesickness. Mingming is with the person he likes every day, but there are only a handful of words spoken, and there is no interaction, just mechanically constantly cooperating with him to complete various tasks. Just like a boss and a subordinate. Not that it doesn't work. It's just that compared to the previous Lin An, this feeling is a bit strange. Lin An smiled slightly. Go. The girl didn't understand what he meant, but soon, he was wrapped around his waist one by one. The black light wings fluttered and flew, cut through the sky, and quickly landed on the back of the current Guzhou Island building complex. The terrain of Guzhou Island is not flat, and Lin An did not raise it to the ground, but built a group of buildings on the high-slope terrain, and made other preparations in the low-slope area. When he landed on the ground, the girls couldn't help being taken aback. Where is this? This is a cliff. Right at the seaside, under the cliff, the waves slap against the rock wall. At a glance, the blue sea connects the sky, which is a shocking beauty. Lin smiled and said, "You said, would it be good to build a small villa here?" Zhang Qingshui didn't look at him, just looked at the sea with a calm expression. "It should be pretty good. Do you need me to call Zheng Lalai?" Lin shook his head helplessly, stretched out his hand to pull her, and hugged her tightly while she resisted. Yin Xiaoxiao just smiled softly and hugged his arm. "Okay, on the side facing the sea, we have to build a large floor-to-ceiling window, and every day I wake up, I can see the sea at first sight." Lin looked at the two girls and said in a low voice, "I've neglected you for a while, sorry." The simple 3 words have great meanings. The girls suddenly fell silent for a while. After a while, Lin could feel it. Zhang Qingshui's hand quietly climbed onto his waist and followed him tightly. "I'm sorry, I'm too self-willed," Zhang Qingshui whispered. She actually felt that she was wrong. Lin shook his head. "It's true that during this period of time, a lot of energy has been devoted to various things, and some of you have been neglected. But trust me, I promise, I've never forgotten what I promised you." Lin said seriously. "Give me a little more time, maybe a month, maybe 2 months. I'll let everything get back on track." This made Zhang Qingshui thoughtful. She raised her head, and suddenly there was some surprise in her eyes. "What do you mean?" Lin nodded heavily, looked at Yin Xiaoxiao who was still a little confused and didn't know what he meant, and said with a smile, "Maybe I already have the idea and ability to end this damn thing. I expect that after the nuclear explosion begins, we will usher in a God-given opportunity. If we can grasp it, whether it is a mutant or a mutant zombie, it will no longer become a climate, and it will become a supporting role in the Doomsday." Lin shared some of his plans and ideas. Really, Zhang Qingshui's rare voice was raised, and it was difficult to restrain her mood. Lin nodded again. He looked at Zhang Qingshui, and he could say a little more finely to her. "Really?" He briefly described his thoughts and plans. Zhang Qingshui's emotions became more and more excited, and finally, she clenched her fists, her face full of determination. Lin was amused by her impatient look, and then said, "However, everything has to wait until after the 11th, and after the nuclear explosion, the shelter can still operate stably. This is the time for our action. But be prepared. I plan to start preparations on November 12th, and I will leave on the 14th at the latest. If we can win this battle, after that, we can completely restore the dominance of the land." After Lin finished speaking, Yin Xiaoxiao was still a little confused. She asked cautiously, "You mean, after the nuclear explosion, the zombies and mutants will experience a brief period of weakness? What about us humans?" It turned out that Lin was in the simulation before. Also got an important intelligence about mutant zombies and mutants. And this information even determines the future fate of these 3 destined opposite ethnic groups. After the nuclear explosion, radiation will cause mutations, and countless zombies and mutants will usher in a second mutation. Even humans, if there is no evolutionary medicine, may become radiation monsters. Originally, Lin believed that this was a thorny problem with endless troubles. But when he has been simulating continuously these days, but suddenly found clues from clues, and after confirming with simulation, he got a piece of good news that made him extremely excited. Yes. Lin's eyes were sharp and his fists clenched. Radiation will cause zombies and mutants to undergo a second mutation. After the mutation, their strength will increase by leaps and bounds. However, before that, the mutation process will last at least a week. In this week's time, their strength will not increase but decrease. The stronger the mutant creature, the longer this process will last. As long as we can grasp this time, we will fight to the death with these mutant monsters. To win. They're nothing to fear. Lin speaks with conviction. Be confident. Lin's goal is simple: beheading operation. At present, he is very clear about the position of the commander behind the mutant zombies and the leader of the mutants. The reason why these monsters are so difficult to deal with and cause so much trouble to humans is because they have flexible commands in a huge number. However, if they can disintegrate their command layer, all the leaders of them will be taken away. They get into chaos. Without a complete command, most monsters with ordinary IQs would fall into infighting and chaos. The dragons were headless, a mass of scattered sand. By then, they will no longer be able to organize a threatening large-scale attack, and how can they, who only have the advantage of numbers, win over the more and more evolved humans? Moreover, the human science and technology tree has not stopped climbing. In fact, under the strengthening of Lin, Many research projects in the hands of researchers have made breakthroughs, big or small. Whether more research results can be produced is only a matter of time. Just a question. In this case, Yin Xiaoxiao was shocked by the future described by Linen, and her eyes seemed to burst into light. Aren't we? We don't have to be so busy, we can peace. She carefully said 2 words. Peace. Linen hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. It's still a long way from these 2 words. But, he grinned. But there is no need for me and you to carry everything on our shoulders. There are countless monsters in this world, not just one person, a few people can end it all. Linen looked into the distance. Beyond this continent, on another piece of land in the ocean, the situation will only get worse. In this once-in-a-century change, all we can do is persevere. The fate of mankind, after all, must be decided by the human race together to face and make peace. Linen said something big and empty, but Yin Xiaoxiao read his mind and couldn't help raising the corners of his mouth. That is to say, at that time, we will be on Lonely Island, just take it step by step. This process is very long, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, in short, at that time, our main problem is how to continue human beings. In the future, how to regain positive population growth. Linen said this with a smile. Zhang Qingshui listened to his words seriously for a while and didn't realize the ambiguity, but Yin Xiaoxiao secretly laughed. What does this mean? Doesn't it mean that the problems in the future can only be solved by time, and in this long process, getting married and having children, can't these things be on the right track? Is it a hassle for us to get married? Do we get married together, or pick one up? Is it in the order of having children? Yin Xiaoxiao smiled more and more stupidly. Linen couldn't help laughing, and gave her the forehead. You'll be happy without a word. Hum. Yin Xiaoxiao gave a heavy hum. Zhang Qingshui finally understood what Linen said. Her face turned red, she let go of her hand, and left Linen in a hurry. You bastard, it's rare to have a chance to talk together, there is no formality. Yin Xiaoxiao helped Linen. What's the matter, we're not all together. Before she could finish her sentence, Zhang Qingshui, whose face became even more embarrassed, directly closed her mouth. Let's go, we still have work to do, since we are not responsible for transporting materials, what we need to do on Guzhou Island now can be a lot. Yin Xiaoxiao is not happy, it has been a long time since she was alone with Linen. But Xiao Zhang is unreasonable. Does this allow you to sneak around and eat? So, Yin Xiaoxiao was searched pitifully, and Linen just laughed. After they walked away, they looked far into the distance. November 11th day, time flies. November 11th, the day destined to be recorded in the annals of history, finally arrived. The Lonely Island at the moment is very different. The planned regional buildings are just like that. Various types of mutant plants with different uses grow orderly on each reclaimed flat land, and grow recklessly without fear of possible radiation. On the periphery, countless mutated plants that look a little scary have formed a complete line of defense, spreading all over the coastline, not only acting as a line of defense, but also for wind and water protection. On a high slope, countless figures flickered. Under the sun, Linen stood at the forefront of the crowd, silently staring at the far coast. The crowd behind him was solemn and quiet, everyone kept silent, consciously maintaining the queue, standing behind him, on the high slope together, looking at the place where the sea and the sky meet in the distance. The uncontrollable voice of discussion quietly spread through the crowd. Really, will there be a nuclear bomb wash? To be honest, if it wasn't for what Mr. Lin said, I would never have believed it. Hey. Hope it won't affect us too much. Has your family settled down? One after another, there were endless discussions, but Linen did not stop it. He just continued to look into the distance calmly. The golden light in his eyes flickered. All the scenery in his sight, constantly being pulled in. Across mountains and oceans, he seems to be a humanoid satellite, and on Lonely Island, he seems to be able to see all the scenes in this world. Boom. In his sight, the sky seems to be covered with countless lines. That is the trajectory of countless nuclear bombs flying. They are flying high in the sky, flying at high speed according to a predetermined route. Then, after reaching the preset location, exploded. Countless mushroom clouds steamed up. Pieces of the earth were torn apart. City after city disappeared. Countless dust flew high into the sky. Even though they are thousands of kilometers apart, Linen can feel the hot breath in his sight. The nuclear bomb, after all, came as promised. Look back. The sea in front of Linen was still calm. He silently turned his head and turned away. Others don't know why, and they look at the country with all their faces. Why didn't Mr. Lin read it? Why did Mr. Lin suddenly want to go back? Did the nuclear bomb not come? Send. Wait. The satellite signal is gone. Has the nuclear bomb happened? This. They didn't want to leave for a long time, until the sudden turbulent waves on the sea. It was as if a slight tremor came from the ground. They got a positive answer from these clues. The real Doomsday has come. They were silent, and after a long time, they returned to where they were supposed to go. Even without witnessing the damage done by a nuclear bomb. But everyone knows that. It's just a matter of time. Radiation and nuclear winter, coming soon. And as the satellite loses its function, human beings will also briefly fall into the dilemma of fighting each other. For a time, some people were in a trance and fear. Instead, he suddenly felt a little fortunate. Still alive. We are still alive, because of that man. So, we are still alive. Lin returned to his room and closed his eyes quietly. After half an hour, open slowly, he walked out of the room, facing Zhang Qingshui and other girls, and said with a firm attitude, "Get ready to go. The most critical battle is about to begin." The transport plane shot a dazzling light high in the sky. Maybe it's because of the distance, or maybe it's because of Lin's strengthening ability. This large transport plane has been strengthened several times now, and it can be said that it has nothing to do with the original appearance. It has become Lin's most important movement. Means. The transport aircraft with vertical landing and ultra-high acceleration capabilities is no longer afraid of the harassment of ordinary flying units. What's more, at this moment, this transport plane flying in the sky with a very clear goal to leave Guzhou Island, carrying 100 evolutionaries. Half of them are veterans who have experienced battles and have been awakened for more than a month, and the other half are those who have been awakened with potions and have selected outstanding leaders with excellent abilities and rapid progress. It can be said that this is currently the strongest force that Lin can command. Zhang Qingshui and other 3 girls are naturally on the list, in addition to Cheng Peng, Qi Tian, Yan Shi and other old acquaintances. At this moment, in the spacious transport plane, everyone is armed to the teeth, all black combat uniforms, various weapons flashing with dim light or nervous or calm expressions are intertwined, symbolizing that this is not an easy journey. The closer the plane gets to land, the cloudier the air gets. Countless dust penetrated through the outer shell of the transport plane and infiltrated into the interior, and everyone could smell the pungent smell in the air, and even felt that the skin was slightly tingling, as if something was spreading on the surface of the body and began to burn. That is radiation. In the cockpit, Lin put his hands in front of him and stared at the gray area in front of the transport plane. At this moment, the sky is also gray. The transport plane swept over several cities, and the iron and steel jungle that was originally cast by humans has now vanished into nothingness. The huge craters almost turned the Earth into a scorched earth like the surface of the moon, and there are a few isolated wrecks all over, like the corpses of the city, symbolizing the traces of the past. Lin's eyes flashed with a faint golden light. He saw through all obstacles, and in the scorched earth and desolation, he could vaguely see that some vague corpses were moving slowly. They can't see their original appearance for a long time. Their appearance is as if they have been scalded by boiling water. The pale white and scorched black are interspersed, blisters and scars, and the deformed body is only hideous and terrifying. Lin quickly judged the location. The satellite has failed, and the navigation, including the line display of the plane, has all disappeared. At this moment, only the solitary plane can be seen on the screen driving on the empty line, but it is impossible to see its own location and details. Fortunately, Lin can use Tianyantong to correct the route and speed in real time, which ensures that the transport plane does not deviate. Originally, it would have taken several days, or even a dozen days, to travel on land. At this moment, in just 5 or 6 hours, he had already reached the vicinity of City H. Lin did not stop the plane, but continued to detour, and at the moment when it flew by, his heavenly eyes captured all the traces in the city of survivors. Not surprisingly, countless zombies crowded it. Traces of mutant zombies abound. Countless powerful mutant zombies that seemed to glow red in Lin's eyes were lurking in every corner. Among them, the most powerful mutant zombie in Lin's eyes was hiding in a church in this city. Ready to fight, he gave the order quickly. In the next moment, there was a sound of movement in the entire transport plane. Everyone nervously grasped their weapons. Then, the transport plane quickly searched for an open space outside the city. Before the zombies could react, they quickly lowered their height. The transport plane was suspended at a height of just over 10 meters above the ground, and the rear compartment was opened. An evolver takes the lead. Prepare to land. When he shouted, he was nervous and almost broke his voice, but there was no fear in his jumping movements. Just watching him fly down, and when he reaches the ground, his entire body is directly flattened, becoming a huge rubber plate. It seems to have directly transformed into a 5 meters rubber platform, which fell on the ground and remained motionless. Without saying a word, the other evolutionaries jumped towards the evolutionary who turned into a rubber platform. Somewhat hilariously like playing on a trampoline. However, the evolvers have also effectively avoided possible non-combat attrition. Not every evolver can currently be 10 meters high. The evolutionaries filed down. Lin patted the driver on the shoulder. Pull up the suspension. Yes. The driver nervously started to press the screen, ready to pull up. At the moment when there is no navigation, and the transport aircraft has been strengthened and completely different from the past, most of the flight knowledge he has learned before is no longer applicable. Fortunately, Lin's enhanced transport plane can be regarded as a black technology, which ensures that he can still drive. Lin walked slowly to the tail of the aircraft, as if sitting on the steps, sitting beside the unfolded door of the tail, with his legs swaying easily in the air. He was in no hurry to go down. After picking up the walkie-talkie on his shoulder, Lin checked the call. "01 call 02. Please answer when you hear." After a brief second of rustling, Zhang Qingshe's voice sounded on the walkie-talkie. "02 received, please instruct." The golden light in Lin's eyes flickered, observing the situation in H City, and then said, "According to the plan, the enemy is currently on your north side, and the abnormality has been detected. Understood, prepare to respond to the enemy." Zhang Qingshe's voice was clear and calm, outgoing. "Be careful." Lin's voice was gentle. "Understand, so do you." Zhang Qingshui suppressed her emotions and didn't care too much. Putting the walkie-talkie on his shoulders again, Lin leaned against the door of the transport plane, which was blown away by the cold wind, and accompanied the transport plane to rise. Pulled up to the clouds, countless gray clouds with a radiant atmosphere cut off the field of vision. It was almost certain that after leaving the zombies' sight, Lin's eyes became more and more golden. This is a beheading operation. There is only one thing he has to do. Kill all the commanders in the mutant zombies. The simulator has told him the best tactical strategy, so next. It's time to wait for the fruit to bloom. Kill. On the ground. The roar that belonged to humans penetrated the obstacles of clouds and corpses. Countless zombies rushed out of Sun City. And the evolutionaries, in an instant, launched a terrifying counterattack that made the zombies stunned. When the evolutionaries saw the corpse group, their first reaction was shock. The appearance of these zombies is very different from before. They were like being thrown into an acid pool. At this moment, their bodies were festering, and they didn't look like zombies at all. It could only be said that they were humanoid monsters. At this moment, the group of zombies seemed to be running faster than before. However, correspondingly, they look thinner and even sicker. When running wildly, parts of their bodies will even fall to the ground, leaving behind parts along the way, which is very disgusting and weird. The appearance of those mutant zombies is also not much better. At this moment, one by one becomes more deformed. There is even a relatively common mutant zombie that sprays acid. The acid stored in the stomach flowed, but made himself smoke. Disgusting, really disgusting. But evolution has also made them keenly observe one point. These zombies are really in a process of mutation. Now they are in the mutation range of zombies and radiation monsters. Just like they are completely different, their abilities do not increase but decrease. Bullet storm. Watch out for the flames. Mineline. After a few loud shouts, some evolutionaries who are easy to cause accidental injuries loudly remind their companions to escape in advance. Some evolutionaries can physically mutate firearms with unlimited bullets, and some evolutionaries can control firearms themselves and make them infinite bullets. Among the more than 100 evolutions, there were obviously only less than 5 who used this kind of hot weapon, but the bullet storm created completely blocked the way forward for the zombies. Hundreds or even thousands of bullets swarmed out every second, and the shooting accuracy was even more stable and terrifying. Just a few evolutionaries practiced their hands, and the firepower network almost covered the entire group of zombies that were rushing out. Countless zombies were shot dead. They're now hitting the heart, or getting too badly wounded and dying. Stop targeting the head. An evolutionary shouted in ecstasy. Where is this evolutionary variation? Zombies don't have the characteristics of being immortal by removing their heads, and they are obviously getting weaker. The morale of the evolutionists is soaring. The ground arcs flickering, and a power grid rushes past. Countless pieces of land burst into pieces, turning into a big fist of mud, and Zheng Li held his hands in front of him, stepping on the waves of the mud, and burying countless zombies while moving forward. Various abandoned vehicle parts scattered around the city flew up. Zhang Qingshui floated in the air, her black hair was automatic without wind, and everything around her circled, as if a goddess had descended. The moment she stretched out her hand, countless pieces floating in the air turned into fatal blows. Boom boom boom. The sound of countless cannonballs blew up a passage almost instantly. Kill. The evolutionaries shouted and rushed forward. A path of ice and snow suddenly appeared. A girl who was covered in ice and reflected the distant cold light in the sun stepped on the ice blade and moved forward all the way from the ice surface, as if she was dancing gracefully. Countless ice spreads beside her, and in the process of sliding forward, countless zombies are frozen into ice sculptures. A mutant zombie with rotten muscles rushed out from the side, but Lu Yao just stepped on it, and the next one, an ice bridge emerged, stepping on the ice in the air, as if stepping on a rainbow flashing by. A handful of ice picks suddenly rose from the ground. The mutant zombie was nailed to the ground in an instant, struggling a few times, the whole body turned blue, and it was frozen to death. Yin Xiaoxiao was at the back, and the moment he stretched out his hand, a huge cannon barrel appeared in front of him. She looked into the distance, pressed the button, and the huge fire snake rushed into the distance, passing countless zombies, and almost exploded a small mushroom cloud at the back end. She even showed a small tactical nuclear bomb at hand. Whoosh! The red laser dissolves everything, and the moment Cheng Peng takes off his sunglasses, the red laser penetrates the corpse and clears the route in an instant. Kill! 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 All the evolutionaries have never had such a smooth battle. The ability of zombies is so fragile that it is vulnerable to a single blow, and it will shatter at a touch. And the zombies have been unable to organize an effective counterattack for a long time. Few mutant zombies want to do it. The next moment, their heads exploded, and Yan Shi, whose eyes glowed with white light in the distance, got it. The evolutionaries practice and learn from each other on weekdays, and they know each other's abilities well. At this moment, they have a complete combat command. They fight like a duck to water, and their advancing speed is almost equal to their moving speed. Lin An was on the transport plane in the sky, and the golden light in his eyes suddenly flourished. Prepare to evacuate, he said to the driver without hesitation. Go to the designated location to meet up. Yes. The driver turned the nose without saying a word, and the transport plane shot out a dazzling tail flame, and went behind the evolutionaries, ready to respond. Lin An took out the walkie-talkie. 02, 03, IM 01, slow down, and prepare to evacuate. 02 received. Zhang Qingshui's unclear words came. 03 received. Cheng Peng responded resolutely. Lin An took a deep leap. At the moment of jumping down from the tail of the high-speed transport plane, the black wings on the back spread out, but instead of slowing down, it continued to accelerate and fall towards the center of Sun City. In the air, countless colorful spots flickered around him, as if he turned into a rainbow color in an instant. At the moment when the gold in his eyes became brighter and brighter, Lin An's eyes fixed on the church in Sun City. In that church, what gathered at this moment was not just a powerful mutant zombie. In fact, at the moment when the corpse group was almost collapsed by the evolutionary people, this group of mutant zombies began to gather together. Lin An judged that they wanted to run away. The reason for the gathering is because the commander of the mutant zombies needs to cover the retreat. And this is exactly when Lin An saw the final victory in the simulator. At this moment, it is the most important moment for the future of zombies and the future of mankind. Lin An's spirit was extremely concentrated. At this moment, countless spiritual energies almost gushed out like black light and condensed into substance. The instant he fell from a high altitude like a missile, the speed was so fast that sparks rubbed in the air. Boom! He didn't evade and slammed into the church like a shooting star. The next moment, a huge amount of dust rose up, and the comet-like momentum instantly knocked down the roof of the building, and several mutant zombies were smashed into minced meat before they even had time to react. Kill him. A spiritual wave swept the entire church in an instant. Lin An looked up. The eyes of the pale-skinned mutant zombies face each other. The moment its blood-red eyes and Lin An's golden eyes saw each other. This mutant zombie is extremely humanized, and fear and despair appear in his eyes. Human. I am the king of zombies. Its spiritual power, violent, seemed to roar in Lin An's ear. Then, a dazzling white light suddenly burst on it. The king of zombies? Lin An just smiled. The mutated zombie that made a decision to self-destruct in just a short moment before the face-to-face. In response, he just reached out and pushed his palm away. In an instant, the mutated zombies around him flew towards him overwhelmingly, and even almost flew into his face. It all stopped at this moment. Destroyed. 2 words gently. Then, there was a sound like a bell ringing. Invisible ripples rippling from Lin An's side like a vapor wave. In the end, the colorful aura turned into a traceless existence, like a storm. Invisible. Colorless. Tasteless. Silent. Only silence. Annihilate. The ripples rippling outward slowly and firmly. And everything around Lin An, including the white explosion that just exploded, also swallowed by ripples. In this way, in an instant, it disappears and turns into nothingness. Withdraw. The moment Lin An fell from the sky, Zhang Qingshui and others got the signal. Originally, the evolutionary people who looked like they were going to attack Wanglong and wiped out the zombies immediately stopped, turned their heads and ran away without saying a word. The battle plan had been circulated before the start, and Lin An also emphatically urged the commanders of each squad to detail the tasks to individuals. As a result, there was no delay at all at this moment, just like a heavy truck driving 150 miles away strangely and gracefully turning a corner, the entire queue turned around and started to retreat. Facts have proved that Lin An's preparation is correct. In order to be able to effectively and quickly wipe out the mutant zombies, Lin An didn't have his ability at all. At this moment, it can be said that he has exhausted all the spiritual energy in his body, and used the most powerful spiritual energy skill that has been researched so far. The power is far more deadly than bombs and the like. Someone couldn't help but look back while running. But only a little white light was seen, and then no sound or abnormality could be seen. However, do not wait for them to wonder. A terrifying scene followed. Just looking at the street in the distance, like a mirage of Buddha, it started to disappear. As if on the drawing board, an invisible eraser was wiping away the portrait little by little. Everything in the distance, except for a faint black spot where Lin An's figure could be seen, was left constantly. Expanded white space. The dust was scattered, but it did not match the original form at all. It was just like the dust that was floating, like a sudden light snow. Snowflakes, scattered, mixed with various colors, buildings, streets, zombies, everything was drifting, like a memory picture that was finally collapsed by the curtain. Run. The evolutionary who looked back shouted uncontrollably. However, it caused more people to look back and observe. From this look, the entire team's rapid evacuation speed turned out to be a little faster, as if the back was on fire. However, the truth is similar. The extinction of the ripples is far more deadly and dangerous than the fire behind. Zhang Qingshui flew up into the sky subconsciously, and while flying upside down, her eyes stared into the distance, until she confirmed that Lin An's condition in the distance was only slightly weak. The Yin Xiaoxiao flew together and accelerated. Lu Yao was skating on the ice with an amazing speed. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help muttering, "This guy has become stronger again. I always felt that compared to him, the speed at which I became stronger was like a snail crawling." A little discouraged, but suddenly a little proud. "Hey my man. Thinking about it now, Lu Yao, you were really helpless." She complained about herself in her heart, but found that the speed of the gradually spreading ripples behind her gradually slowed down, and while she was relieved, the speed slowed down. After more than a minute, everyone gathered at the periphery of H City. At this moment, the corpse group has become strangely restless. They lost their commander in an instant, as if they suddenly lost their minds, and while they couldn't think, they also lost their bloodthirsty hunting instincts as before. It just swayed around, like headless flies, slamming around, and even couldn't help but bit each other. Strictly speaking, these zombies whose bodies have been changed by radiation, not to mention the terrifying and disgusting bodies now, even their brains are in the process of transformation. In other words, the brain isn't fully developed yet. How could a group of idiots be any threat to the evolutionary? The group of evolutionaries were just outside the City of Sun, harvesting with ease and joy. This group of monsters, which can be said to be the highest quality group of corpses at present, became their dead souls. Originally, there were still a large number, or even tens of millions, of wandering zombies, all of whom were lurking and guarding the vicinity of Sun City. The corpse tide was not brewed, but an Asura field was brewed. Countless zombies began to fight with each other. Perhaps it was genes that prompted them to integrate their strengths as soon as possible and recatalyze an excellent mutant zombie as their leader. But in any case, the current situation makes people excited. Lin Anna was late. He waved his black wings and descended from the sky, without any joyful expression, just a light smile. Then, a few simple words caused a mad roar like a tsunami of mountains and tsunamis. The leader of the zombies is dead. With just one sentence, the evolutionaries couldn't help cheering. God knows how much suffering and torture they have experienced before the corpse tide, but now, the culprit of all those corpses has been put to death. Even if he didn't kill the monster himself, when he heard the news, he was still excited and happy. Making the big guy more happy is another thing. Chang Peng rarely lost his temper, and asked, Lin, will the next zombies really fall into chaos as you said? Of course. Lin smiled, but suddenly became serious. It's just, now, it's not the time to celebrate. So many zombies get out of control and devour each other, which will only give birth to more mutant zombies, and it is not impossible for another leader to appear. If we want to avoid a comeback of the corpse tide, we don't have the leisure and time to celebrate at this moment. Lin clenched his fists and said seriously, next, it will be a long tug of war. We have to remove the heads of every zombie so that our friends, relatives, and lovers can wander freely again and return to this place. The land that belonged to us. Besides that, don't forget, we have another enemy. Lin paused and narrowed his eyes. There are not many enemies this time, but they are our biggest confidants. I think you already know their identities. Chang Peng thought thoughtfully. You mean, mutants? Yes. Killing intent flickered in Lin's eyes. He rarely showed such a strong killing intent, but at this moment, he was sincere and hoped to be able to exterminate the group of mutants. His expression gradually calmed down and said, we still have a lot of tasks to do next. We will get in touch with the people in the Yugong refuge, and the next battle targets will be mutants. This time is the same. It is also a battle with the goal of decapitation, but, compared to zombies, the alliance of mutants is similar to an alliance rather than a simple relationship between superiors and subordinates. So, not only do we have to behead it, but also weeds and roots. He looked at the evolutionaries in front of him, and in his eyes, the killing intent was Ling Ran. Do you have the confidence, or in other words, do you have the courage to fight with me again? If this battle is successful, from now on the land under my feet, I will be invincible again. Lin's voice fell, and the crowd was silent for a while. But then, Yan Shi's voice came haha. She wore a red sniper rifle and shouted from the crowd, kill those bastard mutants. F*K them. Kill all the monsters and restore my rivers and mountains. One after another slogans sounded. Lin smiled and affirmed their fighting spirit, and then said loudly, get ready to board the plane to evacuate, target, Yugong refuge. The transport plane in the sky landed vertically on the ground, and countless zombies were pulled statically, but they couldn't even break through the ice and earth walls that Zheng Li and Lu Yao had pulled up. The group got back on the transport plane, after the loud engine sound. Here, there are only a group of zombies with dragons and no heads left, and they have fallen into a slaughter in chaos. However, soon, on the ground, a mouse as big as an ox stuck its head out. It is Lin's Rat King. It squinted its surroundings, smiled, and in accordance with Lin's instructions, began to instruct the group of rats that still reached more than 400,000 at this moment. Boys. Dinner's ready. The group of rats in Zhejiang started a hunt. The zombies who have lost their command are almost like fish on the chopping board. Facing the mice who are smart and good at cooperative sneak attacks, the chaotic group of corpses at this moment is almost impossible to resist. Lin estimated that when the zombies dispersed naturally, they realized that the situation was not right. His group of rats had already had enough to eat. Moreover, the last large group of corpses gathered here will also be completely disintegrated. At that time, on the continent where Lin lives, there will no longer be a habit of corpses. Zombies are scattered all over the place. Although they are still dangerous, they can no longer be called threats. Next, the only threat is mutants. Lin was on the transport plane, not staying with other evolutionaries, but in the co-pilot seat of the cockpit, closing his eyes and resting. On the one hand, it is recovering energy. The skill of deprivation can be said to have drained all of Lin's spiritual power and aura, and even his body has fallen into a kind of lack, due to the lack of aura, which makes the always cautious Lin and was very uncomfortable. On the other hand, it is constantly reviewing the game in the mind, and sorting out the ideas according to the results given by the simulator. The most troublesome thing about mutants is not their abilities. Even though they, like the evolutionary ones, have their own special abilities, some of them may even threaten Lin's safety. But to be honest, Lin has simulators, and after several more visits to find out their capabilities, with the intelligence advantage, the strength of these mutants will be very limited. What is really tricky is the mutant with the ability to predict. To a certain extent, It restrained Lin An's greatest ability to rely on the simulator. In the past, in the simulation, he repeatedly tried to directly solve this rival, but he had to give up because of its predictive ability. But with more and more simulations and thinking, Lin An eventually found a way to break its imperfect precognition. As he had imagined before, the ability possessed by this mutant is not so-called foreknowledge, but is similar to some kind of powerful crisis sensing, able to detect certain strong dangers in advance and respond to them. It may also have a certain similar predictive ability, but in general, it is still necessary to perceive a sense of crisis before it can be dealt with. This leaves room for Lin An to plan. No way to block its crisis perception was found, but Lin An thought of a way to use it. To describe it in 4 words, it is the sound of the East and the West. Just like what Lin An did in Sun City, he used the evolutionary feint to make the group of mutant zombies gather together to achieve the goal of annihilation in one fell swoop, and this time, Lin An will do the same. Only this time, he chose the method of encircling 3 and missing 1, to make these mutants make the same wrong judgment, and then give them a decent ending. As long as the mutants can be solved, then, on this land, there will be no more opponents. The remaining threats exist only in the ocean, and on the other side of the ocean, or beyond, in areas belonging to other countries. But after that, Lin An is not responsible for doing it alone. Let the human beings beside him recreate the order and ignite the fire of hope. The world's problems that will take 10, 50, or even 100 years to solve are not things that Lin An can undertake, or should undertake. This is something that all human beings should strive to do together. In contemplation, time flies, the transport plane landed in the sky, and before dusk, arrived at Yugong's refuge. Although it was said to be before dusk, the weather at this moment was extremely gloomy early, and the dust caused by a large number of nuclear explosions rose high into the sky, almost covering the sky. This is just the beginning, and the long nuclear winter is just beginning to emerge. The arrival of the transport plane made the people in the shelter a little surprised. Just because the satellite signal was lost now, they did not receive the news that Lin An was coming. Fortunately, Lin An had used a transport plane to deliver supplies to the Yugong refuge, and they all knew this transport plane that looked quite sci-fi and looked like a future product, so it didn't cause any trouble. The plane landed vertically in the open space, and the evolutionary people who filed out made the person in charge of the Yugong sanctuary who came to greet them in surprise. These evolutionaries don't seem to be novice evolutionaries who appear in large numbers because of injections, but they are veterans who know that they have been on the battlefield for a long time. You must know that not every evolutionary ability is suitable for fighting, just like the arrogant and unreasonable ability of Yin Xiaoxiao among the evolutionary people. The ability that these evolutionary people have evolved is completely idealistic. For example, Lin An knows that a barbecue master who took refuge in the dawn, the awakened evolutionary ability turned out to be barbecue seasoning, which can summon various spices to make barbecue. You say it's useless, it's really useless, but people always have dreams. Maybe someday they can make some strange special effects. What's more, many evolutionaries were ordinary people before they evolved, and it is extremely difficult to fight like a warrior. So, this also shows the value of Lin An's team. The person in charge of the Yugong sanctuary, Zhang Xiaoyu, has a pretty name, but he is old, and one of his legs is lame. At this moment, he was holding a crutch in one hand, wearing a straight military uniform, looking at Lin An with an eager attitude. "Mr. Lin, I didn't expect you to come here at this time. Is there something?" He was not too polite. Years of professional habits made him familiar with saying things and doing things. Lin An was not hypocritical, and said directly, "I need Yugong Sanctuary to provide me with a group of warriors to fight against mutants." Lin An briefly explained his plan, and indicated that he had solved the mutant zombies in H City, and the current zombies were already in chaos without a leader. Zhang Xiaoyu frowned when he heard that Lin An was about to borrow someone to fight the mutants, but when he heard what Lin An had done in City H, he couldn't help but exclaimed, "When what a hero out of a boy." After a brief tangle, Zhang Xiaoyu focused on the crutches in his hand. "I understand, we Yugong Refuge are bound by this matter. Please give us a little time, we can set off in an hour." Lin An didn't expect him to cooperate with this, but this matter, the sooner the better, and the later, it may cause the mutants to flee because they feel the crisis. In fact, now, the group of mutants may have sensed the imminent aura, and they are even running away. But it doesn't matter. The reason why Lin An came to the Yugong Refuge is because it is the closest to where the mutants are. They want to run, but the direction they can run is limited. At this moment, Lin An's Tianyantong, with the blessing of accelerated thinking, has truly achieved the tyranny of the skill description. No matter where the hides, he has the confidence to find clues and track them away. However, in a hurry, things have to be done steadily. No, we leave in 3 hours. Lin looked into the distance. The dense information from the spiritual connection told him it will take 5 hours for his herd to reach the preset location. This is also thanks to the fact that most of the zombies are currently near Sun City. The mutants are hiding in the mountains, and the animals do not choose the road conditions. All rest. 3 hours later, we set off. After Lin gave the order, the evolutionaries immediately rested in place without any reason. Facing the well-intentioned invitation of the Yugong refuge, the tents or houses offered were all declined, and they all sat cross-legged beside the transport plane. Lin took out the food from the storage space. Yin Xiaoxiao checked and filled the leaks, and a meal could be regarded as a sumptuous dinner, which was a rare compliment under the current circumstances. Looking into the distance, Lin narrowed his eyes. Mutant, but I don't want this group of zombies to be solved so easily. In an endless, sparsely populated mountain range, several mutants with pale skin and no hair were caught in a fierce quarrel. It's definitely not a good idea to scatter and escape now. Many of us are now in a state of weakness. Separating at this moment can only give others a chance to gradually break through. A sturdy mutant irritably bit a deer leg and retorted loudly. We have been hiding together for so long, haven't you had enough of these days? Ray, listen to the prophet. A mutant with sagging skin and an aging look scolded. And the strong mutant called Lei just sneered a few times. Isn't it? How long have we been in this damn mountain range? Over and over, I was told that there is danger, but in the end, now I hide escape, the danger is not only small. Lei violently smashed the deer leg in his hand to the ground, and the arc flashed, blasting a small black pit on the ground. Instead, these dangers have all come to the face. Should have gotten rid of humans with those mutant zombies sooner. After he finished speaking, another short mutant joined in. Yeah, I don't think it can go on like this. The prophet's ability can only predict vague scenes, and we may not be able to resist those dangers. The little mutant was hanging upside down from a tree, like a bat. Several mutants were arguing, and after a while, the mutant who seemed to have loose skin made a concession. It sighed. I know, I will go to the prophet to have a good talk, but this time, I will listen to the prophet first, and you all know that the prophet never jokes. It said that the sense of crisis felt this time is unprecedented, even comparable to the previous Big Bang. Speaking of the Big Bang, the mutants fell silent. If the prophets had not correctly predicted the nuclear explosion, they would have been unwilling to be dispatched at this moment. The overall intelligence is quite high, coupled with the different abilities, it is difficult for them to unite as one, and each has its own careful thinking. If it wasn't for their instinctive desire to survive, it would be difficult to convince them even if a prophet appeared. In the end, even the irritable Lei could only hold down his mood and muffled. I see, this time, we will withdraw. But I hope that the prophet can evolve its ability as soon as possible. If it is just this vague crisis warning, then we might as well break up. In fact, there are not a few mutants who think like Ray. Each of them has different strengths. The gap between the monomers is huge, and the difference between the strong and weak mutants is as huge as Lin and ordinary evolutionaries. Many mutants are thinking, getting together is dangerous every day, it is better to break up. If a few powerful mutants get together, it may be more dashing, and the speed of evolution will be faster. At this time, they still don't know what the mutant zombies have encountered. If they have seen the scene of Lin and the evolutionary fighting with their own eyes, I am afraid they will give up this fantasy. But no way, they hid in the mountains too early, and the times are changing too fast. How could they have imagined that the human beings who could only hide in Tibet before now have thousands of evolutionaries, and even new ones appear every day? Although most of the evolutionary people are far from being a qualified warrior, their abilities are all kinds of strange, and they are not necessarily good at fighting. But the situation at this time was very different from before. Strength and weakness have quietly changed. However, the mutants hiding in the mountains and forests had no way of knowing what had changed. Before, they sent someone to talk to the leader of the mutant zombies on their own initiative, and learned that there is a powerful evolutionary, namely Lin, but at that time, other shelters were still beaten by hot weapons. Therefore, in the eyes of mutants, Lin may be a threat to the human side, and the others, along with the zombies, can be easily destroyed. Mutated zombies are hard to resist bullets, but mutants are different. Their abilities are not comparable to those of the mutant zombies. After making up their minds, this group of mutants began to scatter and retreat very cautiously. At this moment, the number of mutants hidden in the mountain range is around 1,000, but among them, the number of those who can fight and have good fighting power is only 200 or 300. After the scattered retreat at this moment, a very small number of elite mutants gathered together to cover their leader's retreat. The appearance of the prophet is basically similar to that of the other mutants. The skin is fiasco, and the appearance is human-like, but it seems to be a blind man, with his eyes closed all the time, but he can move freely. The mountains are continuous, and their fleeing directions are also very scattered. Speaking of which, it is extremely difficult to annihilate the entire army. It has been a day since the prophet decided to retreat and act. "Are you sure we're going here?" The long journey made Ray couldn't help complaining. At this moment, the further you go, the more remote you are. According to the understanding and study of the mutants before, this is almost all about leaving this section. The prophet realized the emotional problems in the team, which was rare, and explained more. "I saw explosions all over the mountains and plains coming from human camps, countless herds of beasts rushed from the rising sun, and humans like us came from the ridges. Only in this direction, there are the fewest enemies, even only one person." Its voice is hoarse, and it speaks deeply and mysteriously. Lay pondered for a while, then suddenly stunned, and then said in surprise, "You can already predict the detailed picture?" The prophet nodded silently and said, "Since the big explosion, my abilities have been somewhat enhanced." The rest of the mutants were overjoyed. The importance of the prophet's ability to mutants is self-evident. At this moment, its ability has improved again, and everyone is naturally very happy. "It's just, I'm not sure, this choice, right or not?" The prophet said, his brows furrowed, and he said, "I can sense a sense of crisis, a huge sense of crisis. Perhaps, it's not from the herd, humans, but the one in front of us." After the prophet finished speaking, Lay sneered, "That's the guy named Linen. They even know Linen's name. I don't know where the information came from, but they obviously don't know anything about Linen. It should be." The prophet murmured, his eyes closed, and he couldn't help but sigh softly. "Hopefully, my judgment is correct. Even if there is danger, we will kill Linen, the strongest among human beings. It can't be delayed any longer. Can't delay any longer." The prophet recited over and over again. The rest of the mutants looked at each other, accustomed to the neurotic-like behavior of the prophet. Lei Yao smiled, arcs flashing all over his body. "As long as we kill him, we will be safe?" "Yes, kill him, must kill him, if you want to live, if you want us all to live, kill him, kill him." The prophet seemed to have fallen into some painful hallucination. It murmured in a low voice, but suddenly stopped, and a stalker hardly moved. "It's hallucinating again, and I don't know what picture it saw. Let's go, you hit him." Lay's eyes looked into the distance, and the cold blood all over his body seemed to boil. "It likes to fight. Of course. Linen likes it too." What Linen is using is the flaws of the current mutants' lack of intelligence and imperfect predictive ability. There are 3 missing 1. When Yugong Sanctuary is fully deployed to cooperate with the evolutionary and beasts carried by Linen, under this kind of offensive, the mutants who perceive the danger will naturally not confront them head-on. It's a pity that they don't understand at all. It's not those evolutionaries and herds that bring a sense of crisis, but Linen. Although the prophet sensed that Linen was blocking the road alone, out of confidence in their own strength, they finally made the wrong choice. If you join them more cautiously and think more, you may choose to retreat from the direction of the herd. At that time, I am afraid that Linen will not be able to keep all their key characters. However, after all, there is no if. When the group of mutants climbed over the mountains and arrived at a narrow cave, Linen was sitting by the lake, looking like he had been waiting for a long time. When he reached his goal, Linen slowly got up, turned his head, and looked at the dozens of mutants who came in a group in the distance. In his eyes, there was no need to express the sincere fighting intent. "The mutants also know that in this battle, only you and I will die. If you kill Linen, it will be a smooth journey. If you can't kill Linen, then everything will be over." Moonlight. The mutant who carried the prophet snorted coldly. The next moment, the white moonlight appeared. The sky seemed to become more drowsy in the blink of an eye, and the whole person instantly turned into a light group and rose into the air. Whoosh whoosh. The moment this light group flew high into the sky, it glowed like the moon, but the light turned into a substantial laser, which shot towards Lin-En from midair. Lin-En's expression didn't change. He raised his left hand. A huge black shield appeared in his hand, and the white moonlight fell on the shield, making a sizzling sound. The reason why there is no need to teleport to escape is because in the distance, a mutant opens his hands at this moment, and at this moment, countless spaces are compressed, and there are even mutants who can control the space ability in the opponent. It is indeed the elite among mutants. Lin En's eyes flashed with murderous intent, and the next moment, a glass-shattering crack sounded in the air. The mutant who blocked the space in the distance screamed, and the 7 orifices bleed. Under the collision of the 2 space abilities, in the end, it was Lin En has the upper hand. Lei roared, and his whole body flashed with electric light, turning into a bolt of lightning in the air, hitting Lin En like a missile. With a loud bang, Lei slammed into Lin En's original location, but the moment it hit him, he realized something was wrong. Did not hit, threw up. With an inaudible sound of air leaking, a Miao Dao emerged from Lei's neck. Crack. Miao Dao slashed horizontally. Lin En was now covered in black light armor. Miao Dao in his hand cut off Lei's head mercilessly. The impact of the moonlight continued to strike. Lin En didn't even look at it, kicked Lei's headless body with one kick, and narrowed his eyes. Beheading will not kill you, it's interesting. Thunder Prison. The electric arc exploded suddenly, and for a time, all the electric light exploded within tens of meters around, and the bursting arc almost made the ground black in an instant. At the same time, the other mutants attacked one after another. Gravity field. A mutant suddenly raised his hand. Lin En, who was flying in the air, felt as if a big hand was pulling him down. Immediately, he reacted extremely quickly and used teleport, but instead of retreating, he moved forward, and in an instant, he teleported directly to the place where the mutants gathered. Without waiting for the others to react, his hands suddenly fell to the ground. Thousands of tentacles, and everything. In the blink of an eye, black silk threads spread all around. The 4 mutants didn't have time to dodge, and they were pierced into a sieve in an instant. Only 2 mutants reacted extremely quickly, using their respective abilities to escape the disaster. Behind him, there was a roar of thunder. Lei, whose head was chopped off by Lin En before, actually didn't die. At this moment, a faint blue light appeared from the position of its original head, and countless electric arcs connected the fallen head and put it back together around the neck. At this moment, Lei's whole body flashed wildly, like a group of lightning bolts rushing towards Lin En. Lin En just waved his hand, and thousands of black tentacles appeared. The next moment, the length of the blade in his hand skyrocketed. The Miao Dao, which was originally more than 1 meter long, suddenly turned into a 10-meter-long broadsword in the next second. Those mutants who were fortunately not caught by the tentacles were immediately cut in half by the 10-meter seedling knife, and they couldn't even run. Then, there was another flash of space. Lin En teleported and disappeared in place, and the impact of thunder fell into the air again. It was almost impossible to hit with force, this kind of joking as if being ridiculed, at the same time that thunder was burning with anger, but at the same time, it was suddenly a little terrified. Oh, prophet. Almost as soon as he realized it, Lin En's figure appeared high in the sky, stepping on a bright moon. The mutant who turned into a moon wheel hardly expected that someone could step on his head and instinctively hit Lin En with the moonlight, but the black light under Lin En's feet turned into a half arc, and while the moonlight was tightly covered, countless black lights appeared. Transformed into gears, wrapping the moon wheel, rolling and stirring. The bright moon that originally seemed to be bright, now burst into screams. The blood covered everything, deformed into debris, and was absorbed by the black light. At the same time, Lin En quickly observed the mutants, and the situation of a mutant carrying a mutant on his back was really eye-catching. Almost subconsciously, Lin En's eyes glowed with golden light, and he quickly judged the identity of the mutant with his heavenly eyesight, regardless of his mental power. Has danger perception and is evolving into a mutant with complete predictive ability. Found it. Lin En's wings trembled, and the next moment, the instant the shot flew out, he teleported again to escape a gravitational wave and a lightning strike. His whole body turned into a phantom, and teleported to the prophet's way. No. Several roars rang out in his ears. The prophet, who was in a coma and almost lost consciousness in hallucinations, instantly returned to his senses. In the moment when it woke up, it saw Lin En's face clearly. Facing the moment when a black seedling knife ruthlessly aimed at his head. A very human remorse appeared on the prophet's face. It turns out. This. Miao Dao poured into the top of the head. The last 2 words were long overdue. For. What is it then? Perhaps, until the last moment, the prophet finally saw Lin En's face in the prophecy. But, it's too late. The moment Lin En pulled out the Miao Dao, the prophet collapsed to the ground weakly. The big picture is set. Thunder. There was a mutant who shouted Rei's name loudly at the last moment, with a roar of panic. But Rei could only watch the prophet's head fall to the ground. The prophet is different from it. He doesn't have the ability to hold his head on the ground. If his head is gone, then he is really gone. No. Lei's voice from far to near turned into thunder and fell from the sky, but what he caught was only the corpse of the prophet, who fell powerlessly to the ground. Lin disappeared in place again. The feeling of anti-aircraft guns hitting mosquitoes made Lei irritable and desperate. He only thinks that Lin is like the wind. No matter how fierce the thunder and lightning are, how can it beat the ubiquitous wind? The general battle made Lei completely lose the idea of fighting. After the death of the prophet, he was first mourned, and then, he realized something terrifyingly. At this moment, how many of his companions are left? It quickly turned its head from side to side and looked around. Died. All dead. Only 5 left. No, 3 more. At the moment it observed, Lin En's teleported figure swung the Miao Dao again, slashing the 2 mutants who were caught off guard. His Miao Dao is invincible, and his teleportation ability does not give people the time to react at all. This is no longer a matter of unhappiness, but the question of whether time is flowing when this guy teleports out of the knife. It was as if his knife light would teleport and appear first. Before the figure was caught by the line of sight, the knife light had already flashed. Ray was afraid. Or rather, Ray was suddenly sober at the moment. It wasn't immortal. The reason why Lin didn't deal with it first was simply because it was the slowest to deal with. And he seems to be forcing Lin to flicker and avoid, but in fact, is just Lin taking the opportunity to deal with other mutants. He wanted to kill them all. When Ray realized this, it ran away. The prophet is dead anyway. There are only a few of the dozen or so mutants around, or in other words, other than him, the other mutants are no different from the dead, and they can't run away from Lin, who can move instantly. After surviving, perhaps, I can become the leader of the mutants, and wait until I evolve again, until this evolution is completed. Lei Neng could feel that the energy that was constantly churning in his body because of some strange radiation was growing at a terrifying speed. As long as time, maybe 2 or 3 days later, he could become a completely different high-level existence. Can't die here. A flash of lightning flashed. However, this time, he ran away into the distance. Lin picked up the knife and dropped the knife. After the figure flashed in the air many times, he took the last few mutants to death. Taking a deep breath and flickering frantically in a row is really not an easy task. This battle is exciting, but it has ended in just 1 minute. The battle between mutants and evolutionaries is so simple. When both sides have the ability to kill each other, whoever has the ability to work first will win. Just like a battle between top snipers, the outcome is often only a matter of seconds. Looking around, thunder and lightning flew past in midair in the distance. Lin frowned slightly, thinking that he couldn't let this guy run away. If the ability of this thunder and lightning is fully developed, it will not be an ordinary person to truly achieve elementalization. Since it is to cut grass, then root it out. Lin didn't choose to fly. How could the speed of the flight be comparable to that of the moment, when he ran at full speed? Just looking at his feet on the ground, the black light turned into a multi-tailed existence, and for a moment he turned into a multi-legged monster. Each foot cracked the rocks, and the road was bumpy, so he simply jumped over. The black light balances Lin's shape very flexibly, turning it into a streamlined shell, reducing wind resistance for him while accelerating. Obviously running wildly on the ground, it looks like it's flying at a low altitude. The thunder and lightning flashed in front of him, followed by the heavy and muffled sound of Yu smashing the ground. The distance between the two kept shrinking. At a distance of several hundred meters, Lin's eyes radiated a faint golden light. Spiritual power quickly locates and transmits. The moment the figure flashed. Torn space. A seedling knife pierced from top to bottom in Lei's terrified sight. Thunderbolt is divided into 2 sections. Just as Lei tried to piece together his body and once again used thunder and lightning to consolidate himself to avoid death. It only realized that in the air, countless turbulent airflows were obstructing itself like a hurricane. Countless aura light points scattered, gathered and separated, and the electric flower on his body flashed in an instant, and he was dying. No. The screams and begging for mercy are only fixed here. Lin waved his hand casually, and white ripples flashed across. A small area of annihilation slid past, and countless thunder and lightning disappeared. Wait until the ripple passes. Lei didn't even leave a corpse, there was no trace of it, and it completely evaporated. No matter how strong the vitality is, it is useless. Lin let out a sigh of relief, and after putting the Miao Dao into the storage space, it rose into the air. At this moment, in addition to him, some mutants were intercepted and captured, and fell into a hard fight. He needs to support the battlefield as soon as possible. Black wings flicker. Soon, in the main mountain range, the screams of mutants came one after another. Hours later, all that was left was the ecstatic cheers of human beings. Win. Not too much celebration. Lin and the people at the base stepped back into the transport plane. Return to Lonely Island. After returning, Lin and simply let Zhang Qingshui manage on his behalf, and regardless of their retention and worries, he jumped into the deep sea. The black light made him wander in the ocean like a shadow, heading straight for the depths of the ocean. Along the way, there have been countless bloody storms. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days went by like this. For the people on Lonely Island, he seemed to have lost the news completely and forever. On December 3rd, it snowed. On Lonely Island, Lu Yao lies alone on the beach, looking at the snowflakes in the sky. At the moment, the weather is extremely cold. The nuclear winter gradually began to show its power. At this moment, it was only December, but the temperature on the island was already lower than -10 degrees. Ordinary people don't say they are staying at the beach at the moment. Even in your own home, if you don't light the stove, you will feel cold all over. But for Lu Yao, this coldness is not a problem at all. She was wearing a thin combat uniform and stared at the gray sky silently and blankly. Unlike Zhang Qingshui, who needs to take over the stall left by Lin and manage all matters of the base. It is not like Yin Xiaoxiao, who is needed by anyone, and is sought after and worshipped like a Doraemon. Except for Zhang Li sneering at her from time to time, she seemed to be alone again for a while. Linen, when will you be back? She muttered. With a sigh, she sat up and looked at the sea, the layers of waves mixed with the cold wind, blowing her long hair flying. She pinched out an ice flower, watching it bloom, and watching it turn into ice chips. When he was there, he didn't feel anything. At this moment, Linen suddenly disappeared for 20 days, without any news. Xiao Zhang and Yin Xiaoxiao have been busy since childhood. It was only then that she suddenly realized how much she depended on Linen. It was clear that when he was by his side, there would never be such a lonely, sad mood. According to the mouth, Lu Yao suddenly woke up, as if he had been alone at the beach for several days. Reason. Needless to say, of course I wanted to see that bad guy. Really, can't we go together? Even if it is an ocean battle, I can hold my breath for 10 minutes now. She muttered, got up in dissatisfaction, kicked the sand, and walked to the far coast, under the mutant coconut tree that Linen transformed, hit a coconut with an ice pick, cut it open, sweet, cold, thirst-quenching at the same time. There seems to be a bit of Coke-like carbonated bubbles. This guy really loves Coke. Lu Yao wanted to go back, but suddenly thought, maybe he will come back after waiting. Staring at the empty sea for a while, she shook her head. You are really stunned. He's so strong, it's definitely not going to happen. Wait for his news, it should be back soon. At his speed, going in one direction, he can come back around the world in dozens of days. After a few words of comfort, Lu Yao turned around and was about to leave. However, at this very moment, on the sea in the distance, a black shadow broke through the waves and came galloping from the end of the horizon. Lu Yao stared blankly into the distance, his eyes constantly looking hard. Then, I couldn't help but let out a surprise cry, Linen. The figure in the distance seemed to have already seen her clearly. Without waiting for her excitement, she happily rushed to the beach. When Linen was still far away, he had already rushed to the front. Lu Yao barely reacted before he hugged him, held it high and turned around a few times. I'm back. His magnetic voice sounded in his ears, with a reassuring force. Lu Yao's face, without even realizing it, put on a sweet smile, welcome home. Then, a familiar yet unfamiliar touch stuck to his face. She blushed, closed her eyes, and obediently got close to him for a while before she shyly looked away. Enough, enough. Linen laughed, and the words were unbearable, sharing the joy with her. From today, we are safe. Lu Yao was stunned. At first, he didn't understand what he meant. After a second or two, he raised his voice. What do you mean? Although the end is not over yet, the new world that lives in us has come. Linen smiled. In the distance, a sword light flashed. Without waiting for Lu Yao to react, she saw Zhang Qingshui in a white sports suit falling from the sky, grabbing her warm embrace involuntarily. You're back. Zhang Qingshui was rare, and hugged him tightly with some gaffe. Linen fed and smiled. I'm back. In the distance, Duan Xiaoxiao stuck his head out. I'm here, isn't it time? No, you are here at the right time. The joke made Lu Yao laugh outright. Yin Xiaoxiao is the same. But she was crying and laughing, and she almost jumped into Linen's arms. Get together with Zhang Qingshui. Lin An turned his head and looked at Zhang Qingshui. Shizaba winked. However, this time, she didn't flinch as before. Instead, he was cheeky and walked behind Zhang Qingshui. Together with Zhang Qingshui and Lin An, they hugged together. The four people hugged together on the beach, looking at the picture quite funny. Aren't you going? Yin Xiao's voice was muffled. Don't go. After. All at home. Lin An looked up. In the distance, on the sea, a murloc poked his head out, and then nodded to Lin An with awe and respect. He smiled. The mutant zombies are headless, and they are being surrounded by rats and mutant animals at the moment. Luckily, the number of mutants who escaped the encirclement and suppression is very rare, and at this moment, they have already fled far away and left this territory. After that, the only crisis, the murlocs in the ocean. At this moment, he has become his subordinate. Just like Simba, bound by his spiritual power network, as long as he is still alive, those murlocs are like a group of rats, becoming his vassals. At this moment, countless murlocs are fighting and growing in the deep sea. When the strength is enough, they will be arranged by Lin An to go to land, to be precise, land on other plates. Perhaps it only takes murlocs to exterminate monsters from other continents. After that, Lin An may need to remove the grind and kill the donkey, which may give the fish people a reasonable living position. But no matter. Dawn of Doom can be clearly seen. The fire is burning. The future is already clear. Lin An closed the emulator. No matter how he tried to die, he would never see it again. In his simulation screen, a picture of death appeared. Perhaps, there is no need to worry about anymore. Lin An. Zhang Qingshui spoke suddenly. Lin An hummed and let go, but Shi Xiaoxiao and Zhang Qingshui consciously embraced one arm of him. Lu Yao was dumbfounded and couldn't hang it on his waist. Seeing her anxious and aggrieved, Lin An couldn't help laughing. In front of the girl's face, he lightly rubbed her forehead. I built a new house. Zhang Qingshui acted as if he didn't see it, and had some taste, but just hugged his arm tightly. The rest is up to Yin Xiaoxiao. She smiled and raised her head. In the future, we will have a home. Lin An was startled. We? Yeah. Zhang Qingshui looked at Lu Yao, looking at her funny and angrily. Together. Lin An continued to be stunned. Then, suddenly, a wicked smile appeared. Okay. We then, go home. Waiting for Xiao Zhang to react. The black light tail wrapped Lu Yao and flew into the air. Where? That cliff. Yin Xiao carefully grasped it, and told Lin An where he was with a blushing face. Then, the four people flew down the two-story villa that stood on the cliff. Lin An didn't know how the room was furnished, luxurious or simple. But on this day, he understood one thing. In this new home, the bedroom is really big. The whole book is finished.